Hi there, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Multiverse Harry. Get ready for an incredible journey as we present What If Harry Potter time traveled with full powers and had harem. Movie. If you find our stories entertaining, a simple like and subscribe would mean everything to us. Your support motivates us to create more. Here we go! Chapter 1. Ripples through time. Harry Potter jerked awake, gasping for air. His hand automatically reached for his wand, an old reflex from years spent as an Auror. Wait. The bed felt wrong. Too small, too lumpy. This wasn't his flat in London. What the? Harry froze mid-sentence. His voice sounded different. Higher. Younger. Slowly, he raised his hands in front of his face. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, he could make out smaller hands than he remembered having yesterday. The calluses from years of Auror training were gone. Harry fumbled for his glasses on what should have been his nightstand, finding them exactly where his muscle memory expected despite his disorientation. As he slid them onto his face, the familiar blur of the world sharpened into focus, and he found himself staring at a poster of the Chudley cannons on a slanted ceiling. Ron's room? He whispered, bewildered. The burrow? Memories crashed through his mind like a tsunami. He'd been experimenting with a newly discovered time ritual in the Department of Mysteries. Something about the ancient Egyptian symbols had called to him, promising a chance to see his parents, just for a moment. Just to say goodbye properly. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. A loud snore startled Harry. He whipped his head around to see Ron Weasley, a much younger Ron than he'd seen just yesterday, sprawled across a bed on the other side of the room, dead to the world. Merlin Saga balls, Harry whispered, running his hands through his hair. It actually worked. Too bloody well. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Ron, and padded over to a small mirror hanging on the wall. The face that stared back at him made his heart skip several beats. 14. He was 14 again. Keep it together, Potter, he muttered to himself. Figure out when you are first. Harry scanned the room for clues. School trunks half-packed. Dress robes hanging on the wardrobe door. Ron's Chudley cannons hat on the floor. It clicked. Summer before 4th year, Harry realized. Before the Quidditch World Cup. His mind raced through the implications. Voldemort wasn't fully resurrected yet. Cedric was still alive. Sirius was on the run, but alive. Dumbledore, Remus, Tonks, Fred, all alive. A strange mix of elation and terror washed over him. He had a chance to fix everything. Save everyone. But one question remained: had only his mind traveled back, or had his magic come with him too? Harry reached for his wand on the nightstand, feeling the familiar warmth as his fingers closed around it. With a quick glance to ensure Ron was still sleeping soundly, he pointed it at a sock on the floor. Wingardium Leviosa, he whispered, barely moving his wand. The sock shot up to the ceiling with such force it stuck there. Harry's eyes widened. Nonverbal magic wasn't supposed to be this easy for a 14-year-old. He tried again, this time completely silent, just thinking the spell. The sock detached from the ceiling and began dancing in complex patterns. Harry cancelled the charm with a thought, and the sock dropped. Bloody hell, he whispered, grinning despite himself. His magical core might be younger, but all his knowledge, control, and experience had come back with him. Which meant... Harry closed his eyes and concentrated. The familiar sensation of transformation washed over him as he shifted into his animagus form, a sleek black panther with emerald eyes. He had mastered the transformation at 22, after years of study. The fact that he could still do it now was nothing short of miraculous. He shifted back quickly, not wanting to be caught, and sat on the edge of his bed, mind whirling with possibilities. Harry? Ron's sleep-addled voice broke the silence. You all right, mate? It's not even breakfast yet. Harry schooled his features, reminding himself that this Ron hadn't experienced any of what was now Harry's past, and if Harry had his way, never would. Yeah, just excited about the cup, Harry replied, trying to sound like his 14-year-old self. Go back to sleep, Ron. As Ron's snores resumed, Harry lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He needed a plan. The Quidditch World Cup was where it all started to go wrong in his original timeline. Death Eaters attacking Muggles, the dark mark in the sky, the first public signs of Voldemort's return. But not this time. This time, Harry had the knowledge, power, and determination to change everything. "Harry dear, are you feeling all right? You've barely touched your breakfast." Mrs. Weasley's concerned voice pulled Harry from his strategic planning. "Sorry, Mrs. Weasley. Just nervous about the match," Harry replied, quickly shoving a forkful of eggs into his mouth. Across the table, Hermione was watching him with that familiar analytical look, the one that had always seen right through him. Even as a teenager, her perception had been uncanny. Harry would need to be careful around her until he decided how much to reveal and when. "You seem different today," she said quietly as they cleared the table. "More focused." Harry shrugged casually. "Just had a weird dream that got me thinking." "About what?" she pressed. "About how much can change in an instant," he answered honestly. "How choices matter." Hermione's brow furrowed, but before she could continue her interrogation, Fred and George burst into the kitchen, talking excitedly about the Irish team's prospects. Harry used the distraction to slip outside, needing some time alone to test the limits of his magical abilities. Finding a secluded spot behind the garden shed, he cast a wandless notice-me-not charm, advanced magic that should have been well beyond his years. It worked perfectly. For the next hour, Harry worked through increasingly complex spells, confirming that while his magical core wasn't as developed as his adult selves had been, his knowledge and control were intact. He could perform silent casting, wandless magic, and even some of the more advanced defensive spells he'd learned as an Auror. "This changes everything," Harry muttered to himself, canceling a particularly impressive shield charm. He now had the means to protect himself and others from the very beginning. A rustling sound from nearby bushes made Harry whirl around, wand at the ready, another Auror reflex that would be hard to explain away. "Harry Potter is practicing very advanced magic," came a dreamy voice as Luna Lovegood stepped out from behind a tree, her radish earrings swinging gently. "Much more advanced than someone your age should know." Harry lowered his wand slowly. "Luna." Of course it would be Luna who caught him. Her perceptiveness had always bordered on the supernatural. "Luna? What are you doing at the burrow?" he asked, genuinely confused. In his original timeline, he hadn't met Luna until his 5th year. "Daddy and I live just over the hill," she replied, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger. "I sometimes come here to look for blibbering humdingers in the Weasleys' garden." She tilted her head, studying him with those protuberant silver eyes. "But you're not really 14, are you, Harry Potter?" Harry's mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "Your timeline is all twisted around you," Luna said simply, as if commenting on the weather. "Like ribbons flowing backward instead of forward. You've lived this all before, haven't you?" For a moment, Harry considered denying it, but this was Luna, who had always accepted the impossible without question, who had always been one of his truest friends. "How can you tell?" he asked instead. Luna smiled serenely. "I see things others don't. The Noggles told me something big was happening. They get very excited about temporal anomalies." She approached him and, to his surprise, poked him in the chest. "You feel older. Your magic feels older too. Deeper." Harry glanced around to ensure they were still alone, then sighed. "I'm from about 10 years in the future, Luna. Something went wrong with a ritual, and I woke up here today." He hesitated, then asked, "Will you keep my secret? At least for now?" "Of course." Luna nodded. "Time travelers need their secrets. Daddy wrote an article about that once." She suddenly looked serious. "But be careful, Harry Potter. Time doesn't like being rewritten. It will push back." Before Harry could ask what she meant, Luna wandered off, humming to herself. Harry watched her go, a small smile tugging at his lips. Of all the people to discover his secret first, he was glad it was Luna. The Quidditch World Cup campsite buzzed with magical energy. Wizards and witches from around the world crowded the field, their tents transformed into miniature mansions and palaces that defied Muggle understanding of space. Harry walked alongside the Weasleys, hyper-aware of everything around him. Last time, he'd been wide-eyed and amazed. This time, he was scanning for threats, identifying escape routes, cataloging faces he recognized from Death Eater trials years in his future. "You're doing it again," Hermione murmured as they set up their tent. "Doing what?" Harry asked, driving a stake into the ground with a precise wandless charm that he quickly disguised as physical effort. "That thing where you look like you're expecting trouble," she said, frowning. "You've been doing it all day. Like you're, I don't know, casing the place." Harry forced a laugh. Just excited. And maybe a bit overwhelmed by the crowd. Hermione didn't look convinced, but Ron called her over to help with a tangled tent rope, giving Harry a moment to breathe. He needed to be more careful. Hermione was too observant. As they explored the campgrounds, Harry deliberately loosened his posture, forced amazement at sights he'd seen before, and tried to act like the teenager he appeared to be. But his eyes never stopped moving, looking for a particular group of wizards he knew would cause trouble after the match. "Bloody hell, it's Krum!" Ron exclaimed as the Bulgarian team walked past, headed toward the stadium. Harry's attention, however, was caught by a flash of silver blonde hair. Fleur Delacour walked with the French delegation, her Vila heritage causing heads to turn and men to stare slack-jawed. In his original timeline, he hadn't formally met Fleur until the Triwizard Tournament. But now, knowing what he did about her courage, loyalty, and skills, Harry saw an opportunity. Another potential ally. As if sensing his gaze, Fleur turned slightly. Their eyes met briefly, and Harry, with his acclimacy shields firmly in place, felt the wash of her Vila allure slide over him without effect. Fleur's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Harry gave her a small nod before turning back to Ron, who was still gushing about Krum's Quidditch record. "Come on," Harry said, tapping Ron's shoulder. "Let's get to our seats before the crowd gets too thick." The match itself played out exactly as Harry remembered, Ireland's superior chasers dominating the scoreboard while Krum ultimately caught the snitch in a losing effort. But unlike last time, Harry wasn't fully absorbed in the spectacular display. His mind was on what would come after. In his original timeline, Death Eaters had rampaged through the campsite, torturing Muggle families and causing mass panic. It had been the first public hint of Voldemort's growing power, a test to see how many of his old supporters would still answer the call. Harry couldn't allow it to happen again. Not only had innocent people been hurt, but the incident had emboldened Voldemort's followers, convincing many fence-sitters that rejoining their old master was worth the risk. As they returned to their tent amid celebrations and singing, Harry slipped his wand into his sleeve holster, a habit from his Auror days that felt strange in his younger body. "I need some air," he told the others after they'd celebrated Ireland's win for a while. "Too much excitement." "Want company?" Hermione offered. Harry shook his head. "Just need a few minutes. Save me some hot chocolate." Outside, the celebrations were still going strong. Harry casually made his way through the crowd, memorizing faces, following the loudest, most belligerent voices. Near the edge of the woods, he found what he was looking for, a group of wizards in expensive robes, drinking fire whiskey and talking in low, excited voices. Harry recognized Lucius Malfoy immediately, along with Crabbe and Goyle's fathers. Several others he knew from his Auror days, all Death Eaters who would participate in tonight's entertainment. Using a disillusionment charm, Harry slipped closer, careful to mask his magical signature, as he'd been taught in Auror training. "Midnight," Malfoy was saying. "Once most have gone to sleep. The signal will be green sparks from the north edge." "And the Muggles?" asked a wizard Harry recognized as not senior. "Already identified," Malfoy replied with a cold smile. "The campsite manager and his family. They'll make for good sport." Harry had heard enough. Silently withdrawing, he made his way to the campsite manager's quarters, a small cottage at the edge of the field. Unlike in his previous timeline, Harry wasn't going to wait for the attack to happen. This time, he'd be proactive. He knocked on the door, keeping his wand ready but hidden. The Muggle man who answered looked tired but cheerful after a long day of directing campers. "Sorry to bother you," Harry said politely. "I'm from the Ministry of Magic." The lie came easily. He'd used it countless times as an Auror. "We've received intelligence about a potential incident tonight. For your safety, we need to relocate you and your family temporarily." The man frowned. "Incident? What sort of incident?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details," Harry replied smoothly. "But it's standard protocol in situations like this. Just a few hours, and you'll be back before sunrise." After a moment's hesitation, the man nodded. "Let me get my wife and kids." 20 minutes later, Harry had escorted the family to a ministry official he recognized as being trustworthy, inventing a story about overhearing a plot. The official, concerned by Harry's accidental discovery, immediately arranged protective custody for the Muggles. Phase 1 of Harry's plan was complete. The Death Eater's primary targets were now safely out of reach. Phase 2 required more finesse. Harry made his way back through the campsite, stopping at a small, unassuming tent with the British Ministry's emblem subtly embroidered on the flap. He knew from his future experience that this was where a contingent of off-duty Aurors were staying, enjoying the match before returning to work tomorrow. Taking a deep breath, Harry knocked. A gruff-looking wizard opened the flap, raising an eyebrow at finding a teenager outside. "Lost your way, lad? I need to speak to the senior Auror present," Harry said firmly. "It's urgent." "And who might you be?" the man asked, more curious than dismissive. "Harry Potter." He lifted his fringe briefly to show the scar. "And I've just overheard plans for an attack on the campsite tonight." The wizard's expression changed instantly. He ushered Harry inside, where 5 other Aurors were playing cards around a small table. Harry recognized several of them, including a much younger Kingsley Shacklebolt. "Dawlish, who's this?" Kingsley asked, eyeing Harry. "Potter," Dawlish replied. "Says he's overheard plans for an attack." All eyes turned to Harry, who straightened his posture unconsciously, falling into the formal reporting stance he'd used countless times as an Auror. "At approximately 9:30 p.m., I observed a gathering of suspicious individuals near the woodland edge," Harry began, keeping his voice steady. "I recognized Lucius Malfoy among them. They were discussing plans to attack the Muggle campsite manager's family at midnight, using them for what they called sport. The signal is to be green sparks from the north edge of the campsite." The Aurors exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the teenager's detailed and professional report. "That's a serious accusation against a prominent wizard," one Auror said cautiously. "I know what I heard," Harry replied firmly. "And I've already ensured the Muggle family is safely in ministry custody." "You what?" Dawlish exclaimed. "I told them there was a security concern and escorted them to a ministry official," Harry explained. "They're safe. But the attack will still happen. They'll just find new targets. You need to be ready." Kingsley studied Harry intently. "You seem very composed about this, Mr. Potter." Harry met his gaze steadily. "I don't want anyone else hurt because of me." Something in his tone must have convinced Kingsley, who nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll handle it from here. They're planning to wear masks," Harry added, offering one last crucial detail. Death Eater masks. The temperature in the tent seemed to drop several degrees. "Return to your tent, Mr. Potter," Kingsley said firmly. "Stay there until morning. We'll investigate this matter." Harry nodded, knowing he had done all he could without raising too much suspicion. As he left, he heard the Aurors already making plans, contacting additional personnel through their communication channels. With a satisfied smile, Harry returned to the Weasleys' tent, where Ron immediately handed him a mug of hot chocolate. "Where'd you disappear to?" Ron asked. "Just needed some quiet," Harry replied, sipping his drink. "Think I'll turn in early. Big day." As he climbed into his bunk, Harry felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. For the first time, he was ahead of the curve, changing events instead of just reacting to them. Tonight there would be no terror in the campsite, no dark mark in the sky. The first domino in Voldemort's return had been tipped in a different direction. It was just the beginning. Harry woke to normal morning sounds, no screams, no chaos. He slipped out of his bunk and peeked outside the tent. People were moving about peacefully, packing up after the previous night's festivities. No signs of destruction, no ministry officials trying to modify memories or cover up an incident. His plan had worked. "Harry!" Arthur Weasley's voice came from behind him. "There you are. Fascinating development last night." Harry turned, keeping his expression neutral. "What happened?" Mr. Weasley lowered his voice. "Oris intercepted a group of wizards planning some sort of disturbance. Very hush-hush, but I heard they were wearing, well, the sort of masks we haven't seen in 13 years. He shook his head. "Nasty business. But they caught most of them before anything happened." "That's good," Harry said, allowing a hint of appropriate surprise to show. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, that's the remarkable thing. Someone tipped off the Oris beforehand." Mr. Weasley gave Harry a curious look. "Very fortunate timing." Harry merely nodded, turning to help pack up their tent. He could feel Mr. Weasley's eyes on him for a moment longer before the man moved away to wake the others. As they prepared to leave, Harry noticed a figure watching him from across the field: Lucius Malfoy, his face a mask of cold fury. Their eyes met briefly, and Harry didn't look away, allowing just a hint of defiance to show before turning back to help with the luggage. Let Malfoy wonder. Let him report back to the Wraith of Voldemort that something had gone wrong, that someone had interfered. The seeds of doubt and paranoia would only help Harry's cause. On their way to the Portkey Point, they passed a group of French witches and wizards. Harry immediately recognized Fleur among them, surrounded by friends who were animatedly discussing the match. As if drawn by his gaze again, Fleur looked up. This time, her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. Harry felt the subtle push of her Vila allure, stronger than before, deliberate, and again, it washed over him without effect. Fleur's perfect eyebrows rose in surprise. She said something to her friends and broke away from the group, approaching Harry with graceful confidence. "Excuse me," she said in accented English. "Have we met before?" The others in Harry's group stopped, Ron's jaw dropping at Fleur's proximity. Harry could practically feel his friend's sudden infatuation. "I don't believe so," Harry replied politely. "Harry Potter. Fleur Delacour." She introduced herself, extending a hand. When Harry took it, she didn't shake but instead held it for a moment, her eyes searching his. "You are interesting, Harry Potter." "How so?" Harry asked, knowing full well what she meant. Fleur smiled mysteriously. "Perhaps we will have the chance to discuss it another time." She glanced at her friends, who were calling for her to rejoin them. "Au revoir, Harry Potter. Until we meet again." As she walked away, Ron stammered incoherently while the twins teased him about his reaction. "Who was that?" Hermione asked, her tone suggesting she wasn't impressed by the brief exchange. "Fleur Delacour," Harry answered simply. "I think she's from Beauxbatons." "And how would you know that?" Hermione pressed, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Harry shrugged. "Just a guess from her accent. French school makes sense." Hermione didn't seem satisfied with his answer, but they had reached the Portkey, ending the conversation. As Harry placed his finger on the old boot, he couldn't help but smile. 2 significant changes already, preventing the Death Eater attack and making early contact with Fleur. The timeline was already shifting, ripples spreading outward from his actions. The real question was how these changes would affect what was to come. The remainder of the summer passed in a blur of careful planning and subtle testing of his abilities. Harry spent hours each day in Ron's room, ostensibly reading Quidditch magazines but actually practicing wandless magic and refining his occlumency shields. When no one was watching, he tested more advanced spells in the orchard behind the burrow, making sure to never reveal the full extent of his power. The last thing he needed was questions about how a 14-year-old was casting Newt-level spells with ease. On their shopping trip to Diagon Alley, Harry made an excuse to visit Gringotts alone, needing to check if his future knowledge of the Potter finances was accurate in this timeline. The goblin at the counter looked up from his ledger with typical disinterest. Key? Harry handed over his vault key, then added, I'd also like to speak with someone about the full extent of my accounts. The goblin's eyebrows rose slightly. Most wizards your age don't concern themselves with such matters. I'm not most wizards, Harry replied evenly. 20 minutes later, Harry sat across from a senior account manager named Gornick, reviewing documents that confirmed what he'd suspected. He had access only to his trust vault, with the main Potter fortune and properties locked until he reached 17. There is a provision, Gornick explained, for early emancipation under certain circumstances. Participation in a binding magical contract, for instance. Harry nodded thoughtfully. The Triwizard Tournament would qualify, a fact he'd learned too late in his original timeline. I'll keep that in mind. For now, I'd like these monthly statements sent to me at Hogwarts. Gornick seemed surprised by the request. Most wizards your age don't concern themselves with such matters. Harry finished with a small smile. So I've been told. As Harry left Gringotts, he spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Daphne Greengrass, shopping with her younger sister Astoria. In his original timeline, he'd barely known Daphne until they'd worked together briefly at the Ministry years after Hogwarts. She had been brilliant, politically savvy, and one of the few Slytherins who had managed to remain neutral during the war. An idea began to form in Harry's mind. He needed allies in all houses, including Slytherin. And Daphne, with her family's neutral stance and her own strategic mind, would be invaluable. Making a split-second decision, Harry adjusted his path to casually pass by the Greengrass sisters as they examined displays in the window of Flourish and Blots. Excuse me, he said politely as he pretended to accidentally bump into Daphne. She turned, annoyance flashing across her face until recognition set in. Potter? Sorry about that, Harry said, offering an apologetic smile. Didn't see you there. Daphne studied him with cool blue eyes. You're acting surprisingly civil for a Gryffindor addressing a Slytherin. Harry raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware house rivalries extended to basic courtesy. The corner of Daphne's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Most of your housemates would disagree. I'm not most of my housemates, Harry replied, echoing his words to the goblin. Clearly. Daphne tilted her head slightly. Was there something you wanted, Potter? Or do you make a habit of bumping into people and engaging them in philosophical discussions about inter-house relations? Harry laughed, genuinely amused by her sharp wit. Actually, I was thinking it might be beneficial to have connections outside our usual circles this year. And why is that? Daphne asked, her interest visibly piqued despite her guarded expression. Let's just say I have a feeling things at Hogwarts won't be ordinary this year. Harry replied cryptically. Having allies across house lines could prove advantageous. Daphne's eyes narrowed slightly. You know something. I know many things, Harry said with a small smile. Some of which might be worth discussing when we return to school. If you're interested. Before Daphne could respond, Astoria tugged at her sleeve, pointing excitedly at something further down the street. Think about it, Harry said, stepping back. I'll find you on the train. As he walked away, he could feel Daphne's calculating gaze on his back. Another seed planted, another potential ally engaged. The web of changes was growing. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with the usual start-of-term chaos. Parents giving last-minute instructions, students greeting friends, owls hooting indignantly as their cages were jostled. Harry moved through the crowd with purpose, helping Hermione with her trunk while scanning faces. You seem different, Hermione said abruptly as they secured a compartment on the train. Harry glanced at her. Different how? I can't quite put my finger on it. She frowned, studying him intently. You're more confident. No, that's not quite right. More settled, somehow. Like you've made peace with something. Harry smiled. Hermione had always been perceptive. Maybe I have. I decided not to let things bother me as much this year. Things like Malfoy? She asked skeptically. Things like Malfoy, Harry confirmed. I've got bigger priorities than schoolboy rivalries. Hermione looked as though she wanted to press further, but Ron arrived with Ginny, derailing the conversation with enthusiastic predictions about the coming term. As the train pulled out of the station, Harry excused himself. Need to stretch my legs. I'll be back. He made his way down the corridor, glancing into compartments until he found the one he was looking for. Daphne Greengrass sat with her friend Tracy Davis, along with Blaise Zabini, the more moderate Slytherins who had largely stayed out of trouble in his original timeline. Harry slid open the door. Mind if I join you for a minute? The three Slytherins looked up in surprise, Zabini's hand moving subtly toward his wand pocket. Relax, Harry said, holding up empty hands. Just here to talk. Come in, Potter, Daphne said after a moment, her voice neutral but curious. You did say you'd find me on the train. Harry entered, closing the door behind him and casting a wandless, silent privacy charm, a move that didn't go unnoticed by the observant Slytherins. Impressive, Zabini commented, eyebrows raised. Nonverbal privacy charms aren't typically in the fourth-year curriculum. I like to read ahead, Harry replied with a small smile before turning to Daphne. Have you thought about our conversation in Diagon Alley? I have, Daphne acknowledged. Though you were frustratingly vague about the benefits of this alliance you're proposing. With good reason. Harry took a seat, leaning forward slightly. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this compartment. He looked at each of them in turn. This year, Hogwarts will host the Triwizard Tournament. Tracy gasped while Blaise and Daphne exchanged surprised glances. How could you possibly know that? Blaise demanded. Sources, Harry said simply. The point is, this tournament will bring changes to Hogwarts, some good, some potentially dangerous. The traditional house rivalries will be less important than school unity. And you're coming to us why exactly? Tracy asked, suspicion evident in her tone. Because the three of you are intelligent, politically savvy, and not blindly loyal to certain ideologies that plague your house, Harry replied frankly. And because I believe Slytherin House has been isolated for too long, to everyone's detriment. Pretty words, Potter, Daphne said, though her expression suggested she was intrigued. But what exactly are you proposing? Information exchange. Mutual support. A chance to break down some barriers. Harry held her gaze steadily. And perhaps protection when things get complicated, as they inevitably will. Protection from what? Blaise asked sharply. Harry considered his words carefully. Let's just say that certain elements may use the tournament as cover for other activities. Elements that would put pressure on Slytherin House to choose sides. Understanding dawned in Daphne's eyes. You're talking about the rumors. About the Dark Lord's supporters becoming active again. The Death Eater incident at the World Cup wasn't isolated, Harry confirmed. Things are moving beneath the surface. Having connections across house lines could provide options for those who don't wish to be forced onto a particular path. A heavy silence fell over the compartment as the three Slytherins processed his words. Harry waited patiently, knowing this was a pivotal moment. Finally, Daphne spoke. You're not what I expected, Potter. I get that a lot lately. Harry replied with a wry smile. If what you're saying is true. Blaise began. It is, Harry interrupted confidently. Then your offer has merit. Blaise finished, looking thoughtful. But trust goes both ways. What do you get from this arrangement? Allies in unexpected places. Information from parts of the castle Gryffindors don't typically access. And Harry paused. A chance to show that not all Slytherins are bound for darkness, just as not all Gryffindors are self-righteous heroes. Tracy snorted. Well, you've certainly got the self-righteous part down. Harry laughed, genuinely amused. Fair point. But my offer stands. Daphne studied him for a long moment before extending her hand. A trial basis, Potter. We'll see how things develop once your tournament prediction is confirmed. Harry took her hand, feeling a small thrill of victory. Agreed. As he cancelled the privacy charm and stood to leave, Daphne added, "One question, Potter. Why the sudden interest in inter-house unity?" Harry paused at the door, considering his answer carefully. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when we let ourselves be divided. It never ends well for anyone." With that cryptic statement, he left the Slytherin compartment, another piece of his evolving strategy falling into place. The Great Hall buzzed with excitement as Dumbledore announced the Triwizard Tournament. Harry watched the reactions around him, Ron's wide-eyed enthusiasm, Hermione's thoughtful concern, and across the hall, the knowing looks from Daphne, Blaise, and Tracy. His credibility with the Slytherins was now established. That would make the next phase of his plans easier. After the feast, Harry deliberately hung back, telling Ron and Hermione he wanted to speak to Dumbledore briefly. As the students filed out, he approached the headmaster at the staff table. "Professor Dumbledore, could I have a word?" The old wizard's eyes twinkled with their familiar curiosity. "Of course, Harry. What's on your mind?" Harry glanced around to ensure they had privacy, then spoke in a low voice. "Sir, I've been having dreams over the summer. About Voldemort." Dumbledore's expression sharpened instantly. "Dreams, Harry? What sort of dreams?" "He's planning something, sir. Something involving me and the tournament." Harry kept his tone appropriately worried while avoiding specifics that might raise questions about his foreknowledge. "I've seen flashes, a graveyard, a ritual. I think he means to use the tournament somehow." Dumbledore studied him intently, and Harry felt the subtle probe of legitimacy against his occlumency shields. He allowed certain memories to surface, carefully constructed images of dreams that contained just enough truth to be convincing without revealing his time travel. After a moment, Dumbledore withdrew from his mind, looking troubled. "These are very specific visions, Harry. Much more so than typical dreams." "I know, sir. That's why I'm concerned." Harry hesitated, then added, "I think our connection, through my scar, is getting stronger." "A concerning development indeed," Dumbledore murmured, almost to himself. He refocused on Harry. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will look into additional security measures for the tournament." "There's one more thing, sir," Harry said, seizing the opportunity. "I'd like your permission to form a student defense group, just basic spellwork practice, given what happened at the World Cup. With everything going on, it seems prudent for students to be prepared." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A defense group? An unusual request from a fourth-year student." "These are unusual times, Professor," Harry replied evenly. For a long moment, Dumbledore simply observed him, as if seeing Harry properly for the first time. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well, Harry. You may form your study group, provided a professor supervises initially. Perhaps Professor Moody would be interested, given his background." Harry fought to keep his expression neutral at the mention of the false Moody, actually Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. "Thank you, sir. I'll ask him." As Harry turned to leave, Dumbledore called after him. "Harry?" He looked back. "Yes, Professor? Do keep me informed if you have any more dreams." Harry nodded, understanding the subtext. Dumbledore was suspicious, not necessarily of Harry, but of the situation. That was good. An alert Dumbledore was essential to Harry's plans. The following weeks were a carefully orchestrated dance of appearing to be a normal, albeit talented, fourth year while laying groundwork for the changes Harry needed to implement. His first defense against the dark arts class with the disguised Crouch was a challenge in restraint. Watching the Death Eater demonstrate the unforgivable curses, knowing what the man would eventually try to do, tested Harry's acting abilities to their limits. When the fake Moody cast the Imperious Curse on students and Harry resisted it completely, something that had taken considerable effort in his original timeline, he had to pretend to struggle to avoid raising suspicion. "Remarkable, Potter," Moody growled, his magical eye swiveling wildly. "Natural resistance. Very rare in one so young." Harry feigned surprise and discomfort. I don't know how I did that, sir. Constant vigilance, Moody barked, moving on to the next student. But Harry caught the calculating look in the man's human eye. Crouch would report this to Voldemort, which meant adjustments to their plans. Good. Every change created new opportunities. After class, Harry approached Moody's desk. Professor, I was wondering if you might supervise a defense study group I'm organizing. Professor Dumbledore has already approved it, but we need staff oversight. The disguised Crouch considered him for a moment. A study group, eh? What sort of spells did you have in mind, Potter? Practical defense, disarming, stunning, shield charms. Basic dueling techniques, Harry replied. After what happened at the World Cup, it seems sensible to be prepared. Sensible indeed, Moody muttered, his magical eye fixing on Harry's scar for an uncomfortable moment. All right, Potter. Thursday evenings, 8 o'clock, in the abandoned classroom on the 3rd floor. We'll see what you and your friends are capable of. Thank you, sir, Harry said, hiding his satisfaction. Having Crouch oversee the group was perfect. It would allow Harry to monitor the Death Eater while appearing to be nothing more than an enthusiastic student. As October approached and with it the arrival of the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang delegations, Harry continued building his network. His defense group had grown to include students from all houses, including Daphne, Blaise, and a few other Slytherins who had cautiously accepted the invitation. Hermione, predictably, had taken charge of organizing the practical aspects, creating a schedule of spells to practice and keeping records of everyone's progress. Ron, initially suspicious of the Slytherin involvement, had gradually come around after Harry pointed out the practical advantages of house unity. Political alliances are how the wizarding world really works, Harry had explained one evening in the common room. Look at the ministry, people from all houses working together. We might as well learn how to do it now. When did you get so interested in politics? Ron had asked, bewildered. Harry had just shrugged. Let's just say I'm thinking more about the future lately. The night before the other schools were set to arrive, Harry slipped out after curfew under his invisibility cloak. He had a crucial meeting planned, one that could significantly alter the coming events. The room of requirement materialized before him as he paced the 7th-floor corridor, thinking specifically of what he needed. Inside, a cozy study awaited, complete with comfortable chairs and a small table set with tea. Harry removed his cloak and waited. Minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. Enter, Harry called, standing to greet his guest. Luna Lovegood drifted into the room, looking completely unsurprised by her surroundings. Hello, Harry Potter. Your message said you wanted to discuss temporal physics. That's one of my favorite subjects. Harry smiled, gesturing for her to sit. Thank you for coming, Luna. I need your insight on something important. The time ripples are getting stronger, Luna observed, accepting a cup of tea. I can see them around you, swirling patterns like water disturbed by multiple stones. Harry nodded, no longer surprised by Luna's uncanny perceptions. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. You warned me that time would push back against changes. What exactly did you mean? Luna sipped her tea thoughtfully. Time is like a river, Harry Potter. It has a natural course it wants to follow. When you throw in a boulder, like yourself, the water diverts, but eventually tries to find its way back to the original path. She traced patterns in the air with her finger. The bigger the changes you make, the stronger the current pulls to correct itself. How does that correction manifest? Harry asked, leaning forward. In different ways, Luna replied dreamily. Sometimes events still happen but with different players. Sometimes new problems arise that didn't exist before. Sometimes. She looked directly at Harry, suddenly serious. Time creates guardians to stop the interference. Harry frowned. Guardians? Like people? Not people exactly. More like forces. Anomalies. Luna tilted her head. Have you noticed anything strange since you arrived? Moments where reality seems to flicker? Harry considered the question. There had been a few odd moments, Brief sensations of déjà vu, occasional glimpses of shadows where nothing should be casting them. He'd attributed them to the disorientation of living through events a second time. Maybe, he admitted. What should I be watching for? Luna set down her teacup. Time tiers. Places where your timeline and the original one overlap. They'll start small, just flickers of what should have happened. But as you make bigger changes, they'll grow stronger, more persistent. Her voice took on an uncharacteristically urgent tone. Be careful when you see them, Harry Potter. Don't touch them. Don't look too long. They can pull you in. Pull me in? What happens then? I don't know, Luna said simply. But I suspect it wouldn't be pleasant. Time doesn't like being cheated. Harry absorbed this information, adding it to his growing list of concerns. Is there any way to counteract these tears? Strong emotion anchors reality, Luna replied. Genuine connections. Love, friendship, trust, they create stability points in the timeline. She smiled serenely. That's why your plan to build alliances is clever, even if you didn't realize it. Each true bond you form helps anchor your new timeline, making it more resistant to correction. Harry hadn't considered that aspect, but it made a strange sort of sense. Thank you, Luna. This is extremely helpful. You're welcome, Harry Potter. Luna stood, preparing to leave. One more thing, when the other schools arrive tomorrow, watch for the Silver Girl. She sees more than others too. Fleur. Harry murmured, not surprised that Luna somehow knew about their brief connection at the World Cup. Luna nodded. The timeline wants her near you. That's important. With those cryptic words, she drifted toward the door. Good night, Harry Potter. Mind the Nargles. They get excited around temporal anomalies. After Luna left, Harry remained in the room of requirement, considering their conversation. If time itself would fight against his changes, he needed to be prepared. Building strong alliances wasn't just politically advantageous. It was apparently necessary for stabilizing the new timeline he was creating. Tomorrow, the delegations would arrive. Fleur would enter Hogwarts. The Goblet of Fire would be revealed. And the next phase of Harry's plan would begin. The arrival of the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students unfolded much as Harry remembered. The magnificent flying carriage, the impressive underwater ship emerging from the lake. But this time, Harry watched with different eyes, cataloging faces he recognized from the future, identifying potential allies and threats. When the Beauxbatons students entered the Great Hall, led by Madame Maxime, Harry's eyes immediately found Fleur. Unlike his classmates, who were struck speechless by her virile allure, Harry observed her with clear-headed appreciation for her intelligence and future courage. As if sensing his gaze, Fleur turned slightly, scanning the Gryffindor table until her eyes locked with Harry's. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by that same curious expression she'd worn at the World Cup when she'd realized her allure had no effect on him. Harry offered a small nod of acknowledgement, which Fleur returned before taking her seat at the Ravenclaw table. Bloody hell, Brown whispered beside him, still staring at Fleur. She's gorgeous. She's also a formidable witch, Harry replied quietly. I've heard Beauxbatons has an exceptional charms program. Hermione shot him a suspicious glance. How would you know that? Harry shrugged. Read it somewhere. Probably in Hogwarts, a history when they compared magical schools. Before Hermione could point out that she had memorized that book and no such comparison existed, Dumbledore began explaining the Triwizard Tournament rules, including the age restriction that had caused such uproar in Harry's original timeline. This time, when the Goblet of Fire was revealed, Harry felt no excitement, only grim determination. He already knew his name would emerge from it, courtesy of Crouch Jr.'s manipulations. But unlike last time, Harry was prepared. After the feast, as students dispersed to their dormitories, Harry deliberately maneuvered his path to intersect with the Beauxbatons students. He timed his steps perfectly, appearing to accidentally bump into Fleur just as she was turning a corner. Pardon, he apologized, steadying her with a light touch to her arm. Wasn't watching where I was going. Fleur regarded him with interested eyes. Harry Potter. We meet again. Fleur Delacour. Harry acknowledged with a small smile. Welcome to Hogwarts. You remember my name, she observed, a hint of surprise in her voice. You're hard to forget, Harry replied honestly. Fleur studied him curiously. Most boys her age were reduced to stammering idiots in her presence, yet here was this younger boy, speaking to her with easy confidence, completely unaffected by her allure. You are unusual, Harry Potter, she said finally. So I've been told. Harry glanced around, noting that several people were watching their exchange with interest. Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk properly while you're here. I'd be interested to learn more about Beau's batons. Perhaps, Fleur agreed, her expression thoughtful. Bonne nuit, Harry Potter. Bonne nuit, Harry replied, his French pronunciation perfect, a skill he'd acquired years later in his original timeline. As he walked away, he could feel Fleur's eyes on his back, her curiosity piqued. Another connection established, another potential ally engaged. The next morning, Harry rose early and made his way to the Goblet of Fire. The age line glowed faintly around it, and several older students were already dropping their names in, including Cedric Diggory. Harry approached Cedric as the Hufflepuff turned away from the goblet. Morning, Cedric. Morning, Harry. Cedric replied with a friendly smile. Up early to watch the action. Something like that. Harry hesitated, then added, Good luck with your entry. You'd make a great champion. Cedric looked pleasantly surprised. Thanks, Harry. That's decent of you to say. Listen, Harry continued, lowering his voice. If you do get chosen, be extra careful in the third task. I've got a bad feeling about it. Cedric's brow furrowed. A bad feeling? What do you mean? Just trust your instincts if something seems off. And maybe brush up on defensive spells, Harry suggested, trying to sound casual while conveying the seriousness of his warning. Better safe than sorry, right? I suppose, Cedric replied, clearly confused by the odd advice from a younger student. Thanks for the tip. As Cedric walked away, Harry turned to find himself face to face with Victor Crumb, who had apparently been standing nearby, observing their exchange. You give strange advice for someone too young to enter, Crumb commented in his thick accent. Harry met the Bulgarian seeker's gaze steadily. Sometimes the youngest people see things others miss. Crumb studied him for a moment. You are Harry Potter, yes? The Seeker? That's right, Harry confirmed. I enjoyed watching you play at the World Cup. Your Wronski feint is incredible. A hint of a smile crossed Crumb's usually stoic face. Perhaps we fly together sometime, yes? I hear you are good. I'd like that, Harry replied, genuinely pleased by the suggestion. In his original timeline, he'd barely interacted with Crumb outside of tournament events. Good luck with the goblet. As the day progressed, Harry continued his now established routine of classes, defense group preparation, and strategic conversations with students from various houses. By dinner time, the Great Hall buzzed with excitement for the champion selection. Harry sat calmly at the Gryffindor table, mentally rehearsing his response for when his name inevitably came out of the goblet. Unlike last time, he wouldn't be shocked or protesting. He would be prepared, resigned, and focused. Dumbledore dimmed the lights and approached the goblet. Exactly as before, it ejected Fleur's name first, then Crumb's, then Cedric's. The applause for each selection echoed through the hall, just as Harry remembered. Then, precisely on cue, the goblet flared once more, spitting out a fourth piece of parchment. Dumbledore caught it, his expression darkening as he read the name. Harry Potter. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Harry, who remained seated, his expression carefully neutral. Harry Potter, Dumbledore repeated, his voice harder. Harry, please come forward. With deliberate calm, Harry stood. Unlike the confused, protesting boy of his original timeline, this Harry walked with purpose toward the staff table, ignoring the whispers that erupted in his wake. I didn't put my name in, he stated clearly as he reached Dumbledore, loud enough for the nearest students to hear. But I'm not surprised someone else did. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly at Harry's composed response. Proceed to the chamber with the other champions, please. As Harry walked toward the side chamber, he caught Moody's gaze, or rather, Crouch Jr.'s, and held it for a moment, letting just a hint of knowing show in his expression. The disguised Death Eater's magical eyes spun wildly, and Harry could almost see the wheels turning in the man's mind. Good. Let him wonder. Let him report back to Voldemort that Harry Potter wasn't behaving as expected. Every bit of uncertainty Harry could create in his enemy's plans was an advantage. In the chamber, the other champions looked up in surprise as he entered. Fleur's expression was particularly skeptical. What is it? She asked. Do they want us back in Z Hall? Before Harry could respond, the door burst open again as the headmasters and several professors rushed in, triggering the familiar argument about Harry's unexpected selection. This time, however, when Madame Maxime accused him of cheating, Harry spoke up firmly. I did not enter my name, he stated, his voice steady. But whoever did enter it clearly wants me in this tournament, probably hoping I'll get hurt or killed. He turned to Crouch Sr. Is there any way out of this for me? Crouch's response was exactly as Harry remembered. The Goblet of Fire constitutes a binding magical contract. Potter has no choice but to compete. Then I'll compete, Harry said with resignation, adding, but I'd like it officially noted that I protest my inclusion and suspect foul play. This declaration caused a stir among the adults. It was a far cry from the confused, overwhelmed reaction of 14-year-old Harry in the original timeline. We will investigate how this happened, Potter, McGonagall assured him, looking concerned by his unusually mature response. Thank you, Professor, Harry replied. In the meantime, I'll prepare as best I can for whatever tasks lie ahead. As the adults continued debating, Harry noticed Fleur watching him with narrowed eyes, clearly reassessing her initial impression. When their gazes met, he allowed a glimpse of his true concern to show, not fear for himself, but wariness about the larger game being played. Something in that look must have registered with her, because her expression shifted from disdain to thoughtful consideration. When they were finally dismissed, Harry deliberately lingered, allowing Fleur to catch up to him in the empty corridor outside. You did not seem surprised, she observed, falling into step beside him. When your name was called. I wasn't, Harry admitted, deciding honesty was the best approach with her. I've been having premonitions that something like this would happen. Premonitions? Fleur repeated skeptically. Harry stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Fleur, do you believe in fate? In things being predetermined? The unexpected philosophical question caught her off guard. I am not sure. Why? Because I think some things are meant to happen, but how they happen can change. Harry replied carefully. My inclusion in this tournament was probably inevitable. But what I do about it, that's my choice. Fleur studied him with newfound interest. You are very strange for a 14-year-old boy, Harry Potter. I get that a lot, Harry said with a small smile. Listen, Fleur, I know we barely know each other, but I'd like to propose something. A truce of sorts. A truce? She echoed, raising one perfect eyebrow. We're both champions now, whether I wanted it or not. Harry explained. Instead of treating each other as pure competitors, what if we shared certain information? Helped each other stay safe. I have a feeling this tournament is going to be more dangerous than the organizers are letting on. Why would you suggest such a thing? Fleur asked, clearly suspicious of his motives. Because winning a cup isn't worth anyone getting seriously hurt, Harry replied honestly. And because I think you're someone worth knowing, tournament aside. For a long moment, Fleur simply observed him, as if trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. Finally, she said, You are immune to my allure. How is this possible? Harry had been expecting this question. Strong mind shields, he replied, tapping his temple. I've been practicing occlumency. This wasn't entirely a lie. His occlumency skills were indeed part of why her allure didn't affect him, though the main reason was his mental and emotional maturity from being a time traveler. Occlumency? Fleur looked genuinely surprised. That is very advanced magic for your age. I'm a quick study when motivated, Harry said with a shrug. And having people constantly trying to get into my head is pretty motivating. A hint of a smile touched Fleur's lips. You are full of surprises, Harry Potter. She seemed to make a decision. Very well. A provisional truce. We will see how it develops. That's all I ask, Harry replied, offering his hand. Fleur took it, and as they shook, Harry felt a subtle magical resonance, like two compatible magical cores recognizing each other. From Fleur's slight widening of eyes, she felt it too. Interesting, she murmured, releasing his hand. Very interesting indeed. As they parted ways at the entrance hall, Harry couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. The goblet ceremony had gone almost exactly as expected, but his responses and actions were already creating ripples of change. Fleur, who had initially dismissed him in his original timeline, was now intrigued. Crouch Jr. was confused by his lack of panic. Dumbledore was suspicious in a different, more productive way. The pieces were moving into place. Now he just had to navigate the first task, and this time, he wouldn't be scrambling to learn the summoning charm at the last minute. The following weeks brought the expected backlash to Harry's selection as champion: skeptical newspaper articles, Potter stinks, badges, and the temporary loss of Ron's friendship due to jealousy. But unlike his original timeline, Harry handled these challenges with the perspective of someone who had faced far worse. When Malfoy taunted him with a badge, Harry merely raised an eyebrow and said, "Pretty creative, Malfoy. But I'm more concerned with surviving the tournament than with fashion statements." His calm response visibly unsettled Malfoy, who had clearly expected anger or embarrassment. With Ron, Harry took a different approach than before. Rather than waiting for Ron to come around on his own, Harry cornered him in their dormitory one evening. "This is ridiculous, Ron," he said bluntly. "You know I didn't want this. You know I don't want more attention. But it's happening, and I could use my best friend right now." Ron had flushed, avoiding Harry's eyes. "You could have told me how you got past the age line." "I didn't get past it," Harry insisted. "Someone else entered my name. Someone who probably wants me dead, considering the tournament's historical fatality rate." That statement had hit home, making Ron look up sharply. "You really think someone's trying to kill you?" "Wouldn't be the first time," Harry had replied dryly. "Look, be angry if you need to, but don't be stupid. I need allies right now, not another enemy." The directness of Harry's approach had cut through Ron's jealousy faster than in the original timeline, and within days they were back on speaking terms, if not quite their usual easy friendship. Meanwhile, Harry's defense group was flourishing under the seemingly enthusiastic guidance of Professor Moody. Twice weekly, students from all houses gathered to practice defensive spells, with Harry demonstrating techniques that were technically beyond his years but that he explained away as intensive summer study. After what happened at the World Cup, he told anyone who questioned his abilities, "I decided I needed to be better prepared. There are plenty of advanced books in the library if you know where to look." The truth, of course, was that he was teaching spells he had mastered years in the future, carefully calibrated to seem impressive but not impossible for a dedicated fourth year. During one such session, Harry noticed Daphne Greengrass watching him with particular interest as he demonstrated a shield charm that could repel most minor hexes. "Questions, Greengrass?" he asked as the other students broke into pairs to practice. "Several," she replied coolly, stepping closer and lowering her voice. "But the main one is, who are you really, Potter?" Harry kept his expression neutral. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Daphne continued, her blue eyes sharp and assessing, "that you're not acting like the impulsive Gryffindor from last year. You move differently. You speak differently. You're teaching spells some 7th years struggle with, and you do it like you've been casting them for years." Harry considered his response carefully. Daphne was too observant to be fobbed off with a simple excuse, but he couldn't reveal the full truth either. "Let's just say I had a wake-up call over the summer," he said finally. "Some experiences change you. Make you grow up faster than you should have to. What kind of experiences? Daphne pressed. Harry met her gaze steadily. The kind that show you exactly what's at stake if you're not prepared. Something in his tone must have conveyed the seriousness he intended, because Daphne nodded slowly, accepting his answer for now. Your prediction about the tournament was correct, she acknowledged. What else do you know that you're not sharing? Enough to be concerned, Harry replied honestly. Enough to know that traditional house rivalries are a luxury we might not be able to afford much longer. Daphne studied him for a moment longer, then said, The Slytherins you've invited here, we've discussed you. You're not what we expected. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Harry asked with a small smile. Undetermined, Daphne replied, the corner of her mouth twitching. But interesting enough to keep us coming back. She glanced around at the practicing students. This group, it's more than just tournament preparation for you, isn't it? Harry nodded, impressed by her perception. Much more. It's about building connections that might be essential later. About preparing people for what's coming. And what is coming, Potter? Daphne asked quietly. Harry held her gaze for a long moment. Change, he said finally. The kind that forces everyone to choose sides. Before Daphne could respond, Moody's gruff voice interrupted them. Potter! Green grass. Less chatting, more practicing. As they separated to join different practice groups, Harry caught a glimpse of Moody watching him with that magical eye, his expression unreadable. Harry knew the disguised Crouch Jr. was reporting back to Voldemort about these sessions, about Harry's unexpected skills and the unusual inter-house unity he was fostering. Let him report, Harry thought. Every piece of unexpected information would make Voldemort's plans less certain, more prone to error. 2 days before the first task, Harry was walking back from the library when Luna fell into step beside him, appearing seemingly from nowhere as she often did. The first tear has appeared, she said without preamble, her voice soft but urgent. Harry glanced around to ensure they were alone in the corridor. Where? Near the forest edge, where Hagrid would have shown you the dragons. Luna replied, her silvery eyes distant. The timeline tried to correct itself. Create the same revelation in a different way. Harry frowned. But I already know about the dragons. I've been preparing for weeks. That's why it's a tear and not a successful correction, Luna explained patiently. The original event couldn't happen because your knowledge prevented it, but time tried anyway. The result is a glitch of sorts. A place where reality isn't quite stable. Is it dangerous? Harry asked, concerned. Not yet, Luna said. But it's a sign that more are coming. Bigger ones. Time doesn't like being manipulated, Harry Potter. She touched his arm lightly. You should go see it. Understand what you're dealing with. But don't touch it. Harry nodded. Will you show me? That evening, under his invisibility cloak, Harry followed Luna to the edge of the forbidden forest. The night was clear and cold, stars glittering overhead as they picked their way carefully through the underbrush. There, Luna whispered, pointing to a spot between 2 ancient oaks. At first, Harry saw nothing unusual. Then, as he focused, he noticed it, a shimmering in the air, like heat rising from pavement on a hot day. But this was more defined, almost rectangular in shape, about the size of a small window. Look closer, Luna urged. But remember, don't touch it. Harry stepped forward cautiously. As he approached, the shimmering intensified, and within it, he began to see images, ghostly, transparent, but recognizable. Hagrid and Madame Maxime walking together, looking at something with awe and fear. Dragons in cages, handlers struggling to control them. And most disturbingly, a faint image of himself, a younger-seeming, more uncertain Harry, watching from beneath an invisibility cloak, his face pale with shock. That's... Harry trailed off, fascinated and disturbed by the phantom scene playing out before him. What would have happened? Luna confirmed. The timeline trying to maintain its original course, even though you've already changed it. The images played in a continuous loop, slightly different each time, as if the exact details were uncertain. But the core event, Harry discovering the dragons with Hagrid's help, remained constant. You said there will be more of these? Harry asked, tearing his gaze away from the unsettling phenomenon. Luna nodded solemnly. Each significant change creates the potential for a tear. Most will be small, like this one. But if you alter something truly pivotal. She left the sentence hanging ominously. What happens then? The tear could become a rift, Luna said simply. A place where the timelines bleed into each other more substantially. Where things from the original timeline might cross into this one. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Things? What kind of things? I don't know, Luna admitted. But I doubt they would be friendly. Time protects itself, Harry Potter. As they made their way back to the castle, Harry's mind raced with implications. His foreknowledge gave him tremendous power to change events, but apparently at a cost. The more he altered, the more time itself would resist those changes. But what choice did he have? Let events play out as before? Watch Cedric die, Voldemort rise, and a war devastate the wizarding world again? No. He had to continue. He just needed to be more strategic about which changes were worth the risk of creating these tears. The following day, Harry sought out Cedric, finding him in the library surrounded by books on magical creatures. Clearly, someone had tipped him off about the dragons, just as in the original timeline. Figured it out? Harry asked quietly, sliding into the chair across from him. Cedric looked up, startled. What? The first task, Harry clarified. Dragons, right? Cedric's eyes widened. You know too? I've known for a while, Harry admitted. Just wanted to make sure you did as well. Fair competition and all that. Thanks, Cedric said, looking genuinely appreciative. That's decent of you. Fleur and Crumb know too, I think. Harry nodded. Everyone's on equal footing then. Good luck with your strategy. As he turned to leave, Cedric called after him. Hey, Potter? Harry glanced back. Yeah? That warning you gave me before, about being careful in the third task, Cedric said, lowering his voice. Was that because you already knew about all this? Partly, Harry replied carefully. Let's just say I've got a bad feeling about this tournament in general. Keep your guard up, Diggory. I will, Cedric promised, his expression serious. And thanks again. The day of the first task dawned clear and cold. Unlike his original timeline, where Harry had been a nervous wreck, this Harry prepared with calm deliberation. He had decided to use essentially the same strategy, summoning his firebolt to outfly the dragon, but with a few refinements to showcase his improved skills without revealing too much. In the champion's tent, the atmosphere was tense as they drew their dragons. When Harry selected the Hungarian Horntail, again, he merely nodded, as if accepting an expected challenge. We meet again, Harry, Fleur said softly as they waited for their turns. She looked pale but determined, her wand gripped tightly in her hand. Nervous? Harry asked. A little, she admitted. Dragons are formidable opponents. Focus on their eyes, Harry suggested quietly. Dragons have sensitive eyes, it's a weak point. And they're slower to turn left because of their heart position on the right side of their chest cavity. Fleur's eyebrows rose in surprise. How do you know such things? Harry smiled slightly. I told you, I'm a quick study when motivated. And avoiding being burned to a crisp is pretty motivating. A ghost of a smile touched Fleur's lips. Indeed it is. She hesitated, then added, Thank you for the advice. Our truce, remember? Harry replied. Good luck out there. As Fleur's name was called and she left to face her dragon, Harry centered himself, reviewing his plan. When his turn finally came, he walked into the arena with a confidence that his original self had lacked entirely. The Hungarian Horntail was just as terrifying as he remembered, 50 feet of scaled fury, its spiked tail lashing, yellow eyes fixed on Harry with predatory intensity. The golden egg gleamed between its front legs. But unlike the first time, Harry didn't feel overwhelming fear. He had faced this creature before. He had faced Voldemort, Bellatrix, and countless other dangers far worse than this dragon. With practiced precision, he raised his wand. Accio Firebolt, he called clearly, his voice carrying across the arena. While he waited for his broom, Harry kept moving, staying behind rocks for cover as the dragon sent bursts of flame in his direction. When the firebolt arrived, Harry mounted it in one fluid motion and soared into the air. What followed was a display of flying that even his original self might have envied. Drawing on years of additional experience that no one knew he possessed, Harry executed maneuvers that had the crowd gasping, tight turns, feints, and strategic positioning that gradually lured the dragon away from its eggs. The commentary faded into the background as Harry focused entirely on the task, his movements precise and calculated. When he finally swooped down to snatch the golden egg, completing the task in record time, the stadium erupted in cheers. Harry landed smoothly, egg tucked under his arm, breathing slightly elevated but nowhere near the panic state of his first attempt in the original timeline. As the judges awarded their scores, higher than before, given his more impressive performance, Harry caught Fleur watching him with renewed interest. Later, as the champions returned to the castle, Fleur fell into step beside him. "That was extraordinary flying," she commented. "You move like someone who has been flying much longer than 14 years. Natural talent, I guess," Harry replied with a modest shrug. "Your charm work was impressive too. Sleep enchantment on a dragon? Not many witches could pull that off." "It was not entirely successful," Fleur said, touching a singed part of her robes ruefully. "But thank you. Your advice about the eyes was helpful." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Fleur spoke again. "Our truce seems to be working well so far." "I'm glad you think so," Harry said sincerely. "Maybe we could extend it beyond just sharing task information? I've started a defense practice group that meets twice weekly. You'd be welcome to join if you're interested." Fleur considered the offer. "A defense group? Teaching what, exactly?" "Practical spells, shields, stunners, disarming techniques. Things that might be useful in dangerous situations," Harry explained. "Students from all houses and years attend." "And you lead this group?" Fleur asked, her tone suggesting she found the idea of a fourth-year teaching defense surprising. "I demonstrate the spells," Harry clarified. "Professor Moody supervises. But yes, it was my initiative." Fleur studied him thoughtfully. "You continue to surprise me, Harry Potter. Perhaps I will visit your group. It could be educational." Thursday evening, 8 o'clock, third floor abandoned classroom. Harry told her. "Anyone from Beaux Batons is welcome." As they reached the castle entrance, Fleur paused. "You knew about the dragons well before today, didn't you?" "Not just recently." Harry met her gaze steadily. "Yes." "How?" she pressed. "Let's just say I have good instincts about this tournament," Harry replied carefully. "And a growing suspicion that it's not just a friendly competition." Fleur's expression grew serious. "I am beginning to have the same suspicion." She hesitated, then added, "The egg, have you opened it yet?" "Not yet," Harry said. "But I have some ideas about it." In truth, he knew exactly what the egg contained and how to decipher it, but revealing that now would raise too many questions. "Perhaps we could discuss our findings," Fleur suggested, "after we have each had a chance to examine it." "I'd like that," Harry agreed with a smile. "Continuation of our truce." As Fleur nodded and departed toward the Beaux Batons carriage, Harry felt a sense of satisfaction. His connections were growing stronger, his network of allies expanding. Fleur, who had barely acknowledged him in the original timeline until after the second task, was now actively seeking his company. Yet, as he made his way to Gryffindor Tower, Harry couldn't shake Luna's warning about time fighting back against his changes. The tier by the forest had been small, easily avoided. But what would happen when he made truly significant alterations to the timeline? He would soon find out. Because the biggest change of all was yet to come, preventing Voldemort's resurrection in the graveyard at the end of the tournament. And Harry had no intention of letting that pivotal event occur as it had before, no matter what temporal consequences might result. The weeks following the first task brought new challenges and opportunities. The announcement of the Yule Ball created the expected stir among students, though Harry viewed it with a different perspective this time around. Rather than the awkward, procrastinating approach of his original timeline, Harry took decisive action. The day after the announcement, he found himself alone with Hermione in the library, working on transfiguration essays. "Hermione," he said, setting down his quill, "would you go to the Yule Ball with me?" Hermione looked up, clearly startled. "What?" "The ball," Harry repeated calmly. "Would you go with me? As my date?" A blush crept up Hermione's cheeks. Are you serious, Harry?" "Completely," he replied with a smile. "You're brilliant, you're my best friend, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather spend the evening with." Hermione studied his face, as if searching for signs of an ulterior motive. "This isn't because you're worried about finding a date, is it? Because you're a champion, plenty of girls would say yes." "I'm asking because I want to go with you," Harry said simply. "No other reason." After a moment's consideration, Hermione's face broke into a warm smile. "Then yes, I'd love to." "Brilliant," Harry said, returning to his essay as if he hadn't just altered another significant event from his original timeline. In truth, Harry's motivations were multilayered. Yes, he genuinely wanted to attend with Hermione, avoiding the awkwardness of his original Yule Ball experience. But he was also preventing the rift that had formed between Ron and Hermione when she had attended with Krum. Small changes to personal relationships could have far-reaching consequences for group dynamics, and Harry needed his friends united for what lay ahead. Later that evening, Harry approached Viktor Krum in the library, where the Bulgarian was once again being followed by his fan club of giggling girls. "Could I have a word?" Harry asked quietly, gesturing to a more private corner. Krum, looking somewhat relieved at the excuse to escape his admirers, nodded and followed Harry. "What is it you want, Potter?" he asked in his thick accent. "I know you've been watching Hermione Granger," Harry said directly, having noticed Krum's interest just as in the original timeline. Krum's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You are observant." "Yes, I have been interested in speaking with her. She is different from other girls." "She is," Harry agreed. "And I should tell you that I've asked her to the Yule Ball, and she's accepted." A flash of disappointment crossed Krum's face. "I see. You are together, then?" "We're close friends," Harry clarified. "But I thought you should know, so you're not caught off guard." He paused, then added, "I've also been meaning to take you up on that offer to fly sometime. Maybe this weekend if you're free?" The change of subject seemed to catch Krum by surprise, but he nodded, looking pleased by the suggestion. "Saturday morning, perhaps? Before others are awake." "Perfect," Harry agreed. "And Victor?" "There's a defense practice group I run on Thursday evenings. You'd be welcome to join if you're interested. Several students from different houses attend." Krum considered this. "A defense group? Led by you?" "Supervised by Professor Moody, but yes, I demonstrate the spells," Harry explained. "Interesting," Krum said, looking at Harry with new respect. "Perhaps I will come. It would be good to see British teaching methods." As Harry walked away, he mentally checked another item off his list. Krum, who had been a distant figure in the original timeline until much later, was now potentially another ally. The network continued to grow. The next piece fell into place later that week during a defense group session. Fleur arrived as promised, bringing with her 2 other Beauxbatons students. As they entered, conversations halted momentarily, all eyes turning to the French visitors. "Welcome," Harry said, stepping forward. "Glad you could make it." Fleur nodded regally. "We were curious about your British training methods." Her eyes swept the room, taking in the mixed houses and years. "This is not what I expected." "We're just getting started," Harry explained, gesturing for them to join the circle. "Today we're working on shield charms, specifically, variations that can deflect different types of spells. As the session progressed, Harry demonstrated increasingly complex shields, explaining their uses and limitations. To his satisfaction, both Fleur and Crumb, who had arrived shortly after, participated actively, occasionally offering insights from their own school's techniques. By the end of the 2 hours, the international element had transformed the atmosphere of the group. Students who normally stuck to their house cliques were mingling, comparing notes, and practicing together. "This is quite impressive, Harry," Fleur commented as they wrapped up. "You have created something unique here." "It's just practical," Harry replied with a modest shrug. "We all benefit from learning from each other." "Perhaps," Fleur agreed, "but it takes vision to see that. And leadership to make it happen." Her eyes studied him thoughtfully. "You continue to surprise me." As students filed out, Harry noticed Moody, watching him with that calculating gaze that had become increasingly common. The disguised Crouch Jr. had been observing Harry's unusual behaviors with growing interest, and Harry suspected increasing concern about how they might affect Voldemort's plans. "Good session, Potter," Moody growled as Harry passed. "Unusual spell work for your age." "Very unusual. Just applying myself, Professor," Harry replied innocently. "With everything that's happened in the past few years at Hogwarts, it seemed prudent to be prepared." Moody's magical eye swiveled wildly. "Constant vigilance, eh? Good philosophy." He leaned slightly closer. "Keep it up. You'll need it before this year is out, I'd wager." The veiled threat wasn't lost on Harry, who simply nodded and continued on his way, mentally noting another successful nudge to the timeline. The more confused and concerned Crouch Jr. became about Harry's capabilities, the more likely he was to make mistakes in his impersonation or his reports back to Voldemort. Days later, Harry sat in the prefect's bathroom at midnight, the golden egg open beside him underwater, its haunting murmish song filling the echoing chamber. Though he already knew the clue's message, he had to maintain appearances by solving it. As he contemplated the riddle he already understood, the bathroom door creaked open. Harry tensed, reaching for his wand, only to relax when he saw Fleur Delacour slip inside, her own golden egg tucked under her arm. She stopped short at the sight of Harry in the large bath. "Oh! I did not expect anyone to be here." "Fleur," Harry acknowledged, careful to keep his lower half beneath the bubbles. "Same idea, I see." Fleur recovered quickly from her surprise, closing the door behind her. "Madame Maxime suggested water might help with the egg. I see she was correct." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you solved it?" "Just now," Harry confirmed. "It's Murmish. They'll take something we'll miss, and we'll have an hour to find it in the lake." Fleur's eyebrows rose. "You deciphered that very quickly." Harry shrugged. "The underwater part was the key. Once I could understand the words, the message was straightforward." "Indeed," Fleur said, though she continued to look at him with that assessing gaze that had become familiar. After a moment, she asked, "Would you mind if I confirmed for myself?" Harry gestured to the vast tub. "It's big enough for 2 people to be in opposite ends without it being awkward. I can turn around while you get in." Fleur seemed amused by his consideration. "That would be acceptable." Harry turned away, giving her privacy as she presumably removed her outer robes. He heard the gentle splash as she entered the water at the far end of the bath. "You may turn back now," she said after a moment. When Harry did, he saw that Fleur had positioned herself at the opposite end, the bubbles maintaining both their modesty. She had opened her egg underwater and was listening to the same eerie singing Harry had deciphered minutes earlier. When she surfaced, she nodded. "You are correct. The Black Lake, then. With the merpeople." "That's my interpretation," Harry agreed. "And what is your strategy for breathing underwater for an hour?" Fleur asked casually, too casually. Harry smiled slightly. "That would be telling, wouldn't it? What happened to our truce? Information sharing, was it not?" Fleur replied with an innocent expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "About dangers, yes. Not about specific tactics," Harry clarified. "Though I will say this, The library has several useful books on underwater exploration. In the magical creatures section, oddly enough. Fleur laughed softly. Very diplomatic, Harry. She studied him for a moment, then said more seriously, "You are handling this tournament very differently than I expected." "How so?" "Most 14-year-olds would be terrified. Overwhelmed. Looking for any advantage, any help." She tilted her head slightly. "But you seem prepared. Almost as if you knew what was coming." Harry met her gaze steadily. "Maybe I'm just good at hiding my fear." "No." Fleur shook her head slightly. "It is more than that. There is something older about you. In your eyes." She hesitated, then added, "I have some Vila abilities beyond the allure, you know. We can sense certain things about people, their emotions, their temporal state." Harry's pulse quickened. Temporal state? It is difficult to explain in English, Fleur said, watching him closely. "But you feel out of sync. As if your essence has experienced more than your physical form suggests." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Almost as if you have lived longer than your years." For a moment, Harry considered deflecting, maintaining the carefully constructed facade he'd been presenting. But something in Fleur's expression, a genuine curiosity mixed with something like recognition, made him reconsider. "If I told you something impossible," he said slowly, "something that would sound mad to anyone else, would you keep it in confidence?" Fleur's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I would. On my magic." Harry took a deep breath. "You're right. I am out of sync, as you put it. My mind, my memories, my magical knowledge, they're from about 10 years in the future." The declaration hung in the steamy air between them. Fleur didn't laugh or dismiss his claim outright, which was promising. Instead, she studied him with those perceptive blue eyes. "Time magic," she said finally. "That would explain what I sense about you. And your unexpected knowledge. Your immunity to my allure." She frowned slightly. "But such magic is extremely dangerous, Harry. How did you come to be here? A ritual gone wrong, or perhaps right, depending on how you look at it." Harry explained, relieved to be able to share even a portion of the truth with someone new. "I was trying to glimpse the past, just for a moment. Instead, I was sent back completely into my younger body. And now you are changing things?" Fleur observed. "Events that happened differently in your original timeline." Harry nodded. "I've seen where certain paths lead. Some of them are dark. Devastating." He met her gaze directly. "People die, Fleur. Good people. A war breaks out that tears the wizarding world apart." Fleur's expression grew solemn. "And this tournament? It is connected to these events?" "It's the beginning," Harry confirmed. "The catalyst for everything that follows." He hesitated, then added, "In my original timeline, the third task ends with the death and the return of Voldemort to physical form." To her credit, Fleur didn't flinch at the name, though her face paled slightly. "That is why you are so calm about the tasks. You have faced them before." "Yes," Harry acknowledged. "But more importantly, I'm trying to change key moments, prevent the worst outcomes. That is why you approached me at the World Cup." Fleur realized. "Why you suggested our truce. Why you created your defense group." Harry nodded. "Building connections, preparing people, changing small details that might have major ripple effects." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "But it's complicated. Time itself resists major changes. There are consequences to altering significant events." "What sort of consequences?" Fleur asked, leaning forward slightly. Harry explained about the temporal tears Luna had shown him, watching as Fleur's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "This is dangerous magic, Harry," she said when he had finished. "If what you say is true, you are not merely changing events, you are fighting against the very fabric of time itself." "I know," Harry admitted. "But the alternative is letting history repeat itself. Letting people die when I could save them." He shook his head firmly. "I won't do that. Not when I have the chance to make things better." For a long moment, Fleur simply observed him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "I believe you. As impossible as your story sounds, it explains too much about your behavior, your knowledge." Relief washed over Harry. "Thank you?" "Do not thank me yet," Fleur cautioned. "If you are correct about the tournament being a catalyst for this dark future, then we are all in danger. What exactly happens in the third task in your original timeline?" "The cup is turned into a portkey," Harry explained. It takes the person who touches it to a graveyard where Voldemort is waiting, ready to perform a resurrection ritual." He deliberately avoided mentioning Cedric, not wanting to reveal too many specific details yet. "And you plan to prevent this?" Fleur asked. "I'm working on it," Harry confirmed. "But I need allies. People I can trust with at least parts of the truth." He met her gaze directly. "People like you, Fleur." Fleur's expression softened slightly. "You honor me with your trust, Harry. But why me specifically? We barely knew each other in your original timeline, did we not?" "We became friends eventually," Harry said carefully. "After the tournament. And I saw your courage, your loyalty, your skill. I know what you're capable of, Fleur, even if you don't yet." A faint blush colored Fleur's cheeks at his words. "You speak as if you admire me." "I do," Harry said simply. "In my timeline, you fought against Voldemort alongside the rest of us. You stood your ground when many others fled." This revelation seemed to surprise Fleur, who fell silent for a moment, processing his words. Finally, she nodded, as if coming to a decision. "Very well, Harry Potter from the future," she said, a hint of her usual confidence returning to her voice. "I will help you. But you must promise to tell me more about these events you are trying to prevent. If I am to be useful, I need to understand what we are facing." "Agreed," Harry said, relief evident in his tone. "But not here. We need a more secure location." He thought for a moment, then added, "Do you know about the Room of Requirement?" Fleur shook her head. "I'll show you tomorrow evening," Harry promised. 8 o'clock, 7th floor, left corridor. "I'll meet you there." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the bathroom separately to avoid suspicion, Fleur paused at the door. "Harry?" she said softly. "Thank you for trusting me with this." "Thank you for believing me," he replied sincerely. "It means more than you know." After Fleur left, Harry remained for a moment, contemplating the significance of what had just occurred. Another major change to the timeline. Fleur Delacour now knew he was from the future and had agreed to become his ally in changing events. He wondered briefly if this revelation would create another temporal tear somewhere in the castle. Probably. But the potential benefits of having Fleur as a fully informed ally outweighed the risks. As he made his way back to Gryffindor Tower under his invisibility cloak, Harry felt more hopeful than he had in weeks. His network was growing stronger. His plans were taking shape. The question now was whether time itself would allow him to see those plans through to completion. Chapter 2, Defying Destiny. The morning of the Yule Ball arrived with a flurry of excitement throughout Hogwarts. Harry woke early, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. Unlike the nervous fourth year he'd been in his original timeline, he approached the day with strategic purpose. Over the past weeks, his network of allies had grown stronger. After his revelation to Fleur in the prefect's bathroom, they had met regularly in the Room of Requirement, where Harry had shared carefully selected details about the future he was trying to prevent. Not everything. He wasn't ready to burden anyone with the full weight of knowledge he carried, but enough for her to understand the stakes. Fleur had proven to be an invaluable ally, her natural magical talents complemented by a sharp tactical mind that Harry had only glimpsed in his original timeline. Together, they had been practicing advanced defensive magic, preparing for dangers that Fleur now understood were far more real than a mere tournament. Harry swung his legs out of bed and reached for his glasses. Ron was still asleep, snoring softly in the next bed. Their friendship had recovered faster in this timeline, thanks to Harry's more direct approach to the tournament and his willingness to share credit for their successes in the defense group. That group had grown substantially since the first task. Harry's impressive performance against the Hungarian Horntail had silenced many doubters, and students from all houses, even more Slytherins, were now attending regularly. Even more surprising was the participation of students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang, turning what had started as a study group into something resembling an international magical cooperation initiative. Exactly as Harry had planned. After dressing quickly, Harry made his way down to the common room, finding Hermione already awake, reading by the fire. "Morning," he said, dropping into the chair beside her. "Excited about tonight?" Hermione looked up, a small smile playing at her lips. "A bit. I've been practicing that hair-smoothing charm Lavender showed me." She hesitated, then added, "Thanks again for asking me, Harry. It was unexpected. But good, right?" Harry asked with a grin. "Very good," she agreed, her cheeks coloring slightly. "Though I'm still not sure what prompted it." Harry shrugged. "Let's just say I've gained some perspective lately about what, and who, is really important." Something in his tone made Hermione study him more closely. "You've been different this year, you know. More focused. More, I don't know, deliberate about everything." "Is that bad?" Harry asked. "No," Hermione said thoughtfully. "Just different. Like you suddenly grew up overnight." She closed her book. "Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to someone older than 16, let alone 14. Harry fought to keep his expression neutral. Hermione had always been perceptive, too perceptive for his comfort at times. Maybe I just needed to grow up fast. Given everything that's happened. Before Hermione could press further, Harry stood. "I'm heading down for breakfast. Want to come?" In the great hall, holiday decorations sparkled overhead, enchanted icicles glittering from the ceiling, 12 massive Christmas trees lining the walls. As Harry and Hermione settled at the Gryffindor table, Harry's eyes automatically scanned the room, cataloging faces, noting positions, identifying potential threats, an aura habit he couldn't seem to shake. His gaze landed on Dumbledore, deep in conversation with McGonagall at the staff table. The headmaster looked troubled, which wasn't surprising given what Harry had been feeding him about, dreams of Voldemort. In this timeline, Harry had been careful to provide Dumbledore with enough information to make him vigilant without revealing his time traveler status. Next, Harry's eyes found Moody, or rather, Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. The false professor was watching him again, that magical eye swiveling unnaturally. Harry gave him a small nod, just enough to unsettle the Death Eater. Let him wonder why Harry seemed so comfortable, so confident despite supposedly being trapped in a deadly tournament against his will. "Harry!" Hermione's voice snapped him back to the present. "There's someone coming over." Harry turned to see Luna Lovegood approaching their table, her radish earrings swinging gently as she moved. Unlike in his original timeline, Luna had become a regular fixture in Harry's life since their first encounter, providing insights about the temporal anomalies that continued to appear around the castle. "Good morning, Harry Potter," Luna said dreamily as she reached them. "Your head is particularly full of Rackspurts today. You must be thinking about the time tiers again." Hermione frowned, clearly confused by Luna's statement, but Harry simply nodded. "Something like that, Luna. Everything okay?" "Not really," Luna replied matter-of-factly. "There's a new tier forming by the lake. Bigger than the others. I thought you should know before your skating expedition." Harry's brow furrowed. He had planned to take some of the defense group members ice skating on the frozen lake that afternoon, a team-building exercise disguised as holiday fun. "Is it dangerous?" he asked quietly. Luna tilted her head, considering. "Not immediately. But I wouldn't get too close to the eastern shore. The boundaries between then and now are thinner there." "Thanks for the warning," Harry said sincerely. "Will you join us later? For the skating?" Luna smiled serenely. "Oh yes. I'd like that. The Nargles are always calmer over ice." With that cryptic statement, she drifted away toward the Ravenclaw table. "What was that about?" Hermione asked, looking thoroughly perplexed. "Time tiers? Boundaries between then and now?" Just Luna being Luna, Harry replied casually, though he made a mental note to avoid the eastern shore of the lake. She has her own way of seeing the world. Hermione didn't look convinced but dropped the subject as Ron joined them, yawning widely. Morning, he mumbled, piling food onto his plate. Ready for tonight, mate? Got your dress robes sorted? All set, Harry confirmed. In fact, he had ordered new dress robes by all weeks ago, anticipating the need for them before they were even announced. Just one of many small preparations that had raised Hermione's suspicions about his foreknowledge. As they ate, Harry noticed Daphne Greengrass entering the Great Hall with Tracy Davis and Blaise Zabini. The three Slytherins had become regular attendees at the defense group, and Daphne in particular had proven to be a valuable ally. Her political acumen and connections to neutral pure-blood families provided Harry with insights he hadn't had in his original timeline. Catching his eye, Daphne gave him a subtle nod, their prearranged signal that she had information to share. Harry nodded back, indicating he'd find her later. After breakfast, Harry excused himself from Ron and Hermione, claiming he needed to prepare something for the skating outing. Instead, he made his way to the agreed-upon meeting spot, an unused classroom on the 4th floor. Daphne was already waiting when he arrived, perched elegantly on a desk, her Slytherin scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. Potter, she greeted him as he closed the door. Interesting developments from home. Your father? Harry asked, leaning against a nearby desk. Daphne nodded. He attended a gathering at Malfoy Manor last night. Ostensibly a holiday celebration, but the guest list was telling. She handed him a small piece of parchment with names written in neat script. Notice a pattern? Harry scanned the list, recognizing most names immediately. Crabbe, Goyle, Knott, Avery, McNair, Yaxley, all Death Eaters who would eventually return to Voldemort's side in the original timeline. All former supporters, Harry noted, keeping his tone carefully neutral. Any idea what was discussed? Father wasn't included in the private meeting, but he overheard mentions of the tournament and the Potter boy before Lucius cast privacy charms. Daphne studied Harry's reaction closely. They're very interested in you, Potter. More specifically, in your unexpected aptitude for defensive magic. Harry nodded thoughtfully. Not surprising. Anything else? Just rumors, Daphne said, lowering her voice slightly. But there's talk of movement in Albania. Dark magical signatures that have the continental authorities concerned. Albania, where Voldemort had been hiding as a wraith before Wormtail found him. This was new information. In the original timeline, Harry hadn't known about any official detection of Voldemort's presence there. That's valuable, Daphne. Thank you. Harry met her gaze directly. Your family is taking a risk by passing this information to me. Daphne shrugged elegantly. The Greengrass family has always prioritized survival over ideology. If the winds are changing, as you seem to believe they are, then it's in our interest to be on the right side of that change. She paused, then added more quietly. Besides, I've seen what you're building with that defense group. It's impressive. Potentially important. It is, Harry confirmed. More than most realize. Which brings me to my question, Daphne said, straightening slightly. The Yule Ball is tonight. You're going with Granger. I'm going with Adrian Pusey. But I think it would be beneficial if we shared at least one dance. Harry raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Making a public statement? Exactly. Daphne nodded approvingly. Nothing dramatic, just one dance between a Gryffindor and a Slytherin. A visible demonstration of the cross-house cooperation you've been fostering in private. It will send a message. To which audience? Harry asked, already knowing the answer but curious about her perspective. To everyone, Daphne replied simply. To the students, that house rivalries aren't as important as we've been led to believe. To the staff, that younger students are thinking beyond traditional boundaries. And to certain, interested parties, she gestured to the list of names, that the next generation may not fall in line as easily as they expect. Harry smiled, genuinely impressed by her strategic thinking. This was exactly why he had sought Daphne out as an ally in this timeline. "One dance it is," he agreed. "After the opening, before things get too rowdy." Daphne nodded, satisfied. "Perfect. Now I should go. Pansy has been watching my movements like a hawk lately. Apparently, fraternizing with Gryffindors is suspicious behavior." "Can't imagine why," Harry replied dryly. As Daphne moved to leave, she paused at the door. "Potter? Whatever you're preparing for, whatever you expect to happen, it's bigger than a tournament, isn't it?" Harry considered his response carefully. "Yes. Much bigger." Daphne studied him for a long moment, then nodded once more. "I thought so. See you tonight, Potter." After she left, Harry remained in the classroom, thinking. The pieces were moving faster now, alignments shifting. In his original timeline, he'd been largely isolated during the tournament, cut off from potential allies by house rivalries and his own limited perspective. This time, he was deliberately building connections across those boundaries, creating a network that could prove crucial in the coming conflict. But every change created ripples. And according to Luna, those ripples were forming increasingly significant tears in the fabric of time itself. Harry needed to see this new tear for himself. The lake gleamed under the winter sun, its surface frozen solid in the December cold. A group of students had already gathered near the edge, strapping on ice skates conjured by older students or transfigured from shoes. Laughter echoed across the grounds as they slid and stumbled on the ice. Harry scanned the eastern shoreline, where Luna had warned of the new temporal tear. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just ice, snow, and the distant edge of the forbidden forest. But as he focused, squinting slightly, he noticed it, a shimmering distortion in the air, larger than any he'd seen before, perhaps the size of a doorway. "Do you see it too?" Luna's dreamy voice came from beside him. He hadn't heard her approach. "Yeah," Harry confirmed, keeping his voice low. "It's bigger than the others." Luna nodded solemnly. "The changes are accumulating. Each alteration you make pushes against time's original path. The pressure builds, creating these release points." "What happens if someone else notices them?" Harry asked, concerned. "Or worse, what if someone touches one?" "Most people can't see them," Luna explained. "You can because you're the source of the disruption. I can because, well..." She smiled vaguely. "I've always seen things others miss. But if someone did touch one..." She shuddered slightly. "I don't think they'd enjoy the experience." Harry studied the shimmering distortion more closely. Within it, he could make out faint images, ghostly figures moving across the frozen lake. With a jolt of recognition, he realized he was seeing echoes of the original timeline, himself and Ron walking along the shore, Harry fretting about the golden egg clue he hadn't yet solved. "It's showing the past," he murmured. "Or rather, what would have been." "Yes," Luna confirmed. "The path not taken. The timeline trying to assert itself." She touched his arm lightly. "Be careful, Harry Potter. The more significant your changes, the larger these tears will become. And if they grow large enough..." "What?" Harry prompted when she didn't continue. Luna's silver eyes were unusually serious. "If they grow large enough, they might not just show the original timeline. They might pull pieces of it through." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "Pieces? What kind of pieces?" "Events. Objects." Luna hesitated. "Perhaps even people." Before Harry could ask more questions, Ron's voice called out from the ice. "Harry! Luna! Are you coming or what?" Neville's already face-planted 3 times. "Coming," Harry called back, forcing a smile. To Luna he whispered, "We'll talk more later." The afternoon passed in a blur of skating, snowball fights, and laughter, a rare moment of normalcy in what had become an increasingly complex web of plans and counter-plans. Harry participated fully, but part of his mind remained fixed on Luna's warning. If the temporal tears could actually pull elements from the original timeline into this one, the implications were staggering, and potentially dangerous. As the afternoon light began to fade and students headed back to the castle to prepare for the ball, Harry noticed Fleur walking along the lake's edge, apparently lost in thought. He skated over to the shore, removing his transfigured skates with a quick spell. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, falling into step beside her. Fleur glanced at him, a small smile touching her lips. "I was thinking about what you told me. About the future, your past, and how different things are becoming." "Having second thoughts about believing me?" Harry asked. "Nah," Fleur shook her head. "That is not it. I was thinking about destinies. If they can truly be changed." She gestured toward the castle. "In your original timeline, I did not know you well during the tournament. We were merely competitors." "That's right," Harry confirmed. "We became friends later after." He trailed off, not wanting to mention her marriage to Bill Weasley, a future that might not happen in this timeline. "After the tournament," Fleur finished for him. "And now, everything is different. We are allies, confidants." She looked at him curiously. "Do you ever wonder if some connections are inevitable? If certain people are meant to be in each other's lives, regardless of how the details change?" The question caught Harry off guard. He'd been so focused on the tactical aspects of changing the timeline that he hadn't fully considered the philosophical implications for relationships and connections. "I've wondered that," he admitted. "Some people have appeared in my life in this timeline exactly as before, Luna, for instance. Others in completely different ways." He glanced at Fleur. "Like you?" Fleur nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps the universe has patterns it tries to maintain, even as the details shift." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Harry noticed they were approaching the eastern shore, where the temporal tiers shimmered ominously. "We should head back," he said quickly, taking Fleur's arm gently to guide her in a different direction. "It's getting cold." Fleur allowed herself to be redirected, but her sharp eyes had already noticed his reaction. "What is it? What did you see?" Harry hesitated, then decided she deserved to know. "A temporal tear. Like I explained before, places where the original timeline shows through. Luna says they're getting bigger, more dangerous." Fleur's gaze swept the shoreline, trying to see what Harry could. "I cannot see anything." "Count yourself lucky," Harry said grimly. "According to Luna, only those directly connected to the time disruption can perceive them." He started walking back toward the castle. "We should prepare for the ball. But tomorrow, we need to talk more about these tiers. I think they could complicate our plans." As they reached the castle entrance, Fleur touched his arm lightly. "Be careful tonight, Harry. The ball may seem like a celebration, but it is also politics. Everyone will be watching the champions, especially you." "I know," Harry assured her. "I've got a few strategic moves planned." Fleur's eyebrows rose in interest, but she didn't press for details. "Then I look forward to seeing them unfold. Until tonight." With a graceful nod, she headed toward the Beauxbatons carriage, leaving Harry to make his way back to Gryffindor Tower, his mind already shifting to the evening ahead. The Yule Ball in his original timeline had been a mostly awkward affair, memorable primarily for the arguments it had sparked between his friends. This time, Harry intended to make it count, not just as a social event, but as another strategic piece in his evolving plan to reshape the future. Harry adjusted his dark green dress robes in the mirror, satisfying himself that they complemented his eyes exactly as intended. Unlike the original timeline, where he'd worn whatever was available, this time he had ordered custom-tailored robes from a high-end shop in Diagon Alley, using funds from his trust vault. Appearances mattered in wizarding politics, a lesson he'd learned far too late in his first life. "Bloody hell, Harry," Ron said, staring at him from across the dormitory. "Those are some robes." Harry shrugged casually. "Thought I might as well look the part of a champion." He glanced at Ron's robes, which thankfully were not the frilly, antiquated ones from the original timeline. Harry had casually mentioned to Mrs. Weasley in a letter that Ron might appreciate new dress robes for the upcoming tournament events, offering to contribute to the cost as a thank you for the family's hospitality. The result was a set of simple but dignified navy robes that suited Ron far better. "Who are you going with again?" Harry asked, maintaining the fiction that he didn't know Ron's date. "Lavender," Ron replied, looking slightly nervous. "She asked me, actually. After that shield charm I mastered in the defense group. Said it was impressive." Harry nodded approvingly. Another small change from the original timeline. Ron's improved magical performance thanks to the defense group had boosted his confidence, making him more appealing to potential dates. "Ready to head down?" Harry asked, checking his watch. "I'm meeting Hermione in the common room." When they descended the dormitory stairs, conversation in the common room stuttered to a halt. Hermione stood near the fireplace, and Harry felt a genuine smile spread across his face. She wore the same periwinkle blue dress robes from his original timeline, but her confident posture was new. She wasn't hiding or waiting for reactions, but standing proudly, her magically smooth hair elegant yet still recognizably hers. "You look amazing," Harry said as he reached her, taking her hand and giving her a small twirl to admire the full effect. Hermione blushed but smiled widely. "So do you. Green suits you, brings out your eyes." "That's what I was hoping," Harry replied with a wink. As they made their way through the portrait hole, Harry offered Hermione his arm with a formality that came from years beyond his apparent age. She took it, looking slightly surprised but pleased by the gesture. "You seem different tonight," she observed as they walked toward the great hall. "More. I don't know, poised?" Harry smiled. "Just trying to represent Gryffindor properly. Besides," he added with a more serious tone, "after everything with the tournament so far, a night of normal teenage activities feels like a welcome break." That was a half-truth at best. While Harry was looking forward to aspects of the evening, particularly his dance with Hermione, most of his attention was focused on the strategic elements, the conversations he needed to have, the connections he needed to reinforce, the impressions he needed to make. The entrance hall buzzed with activity as students from all three schools mingled, awaiting the opening of the great hall doors. Harry spotted Fleur immediately. She was impossible to miss in silvery gray robes that seemed to shimmer with her movement, her Vila heritage making her practically glow in the candlelight. She had come with Roger Davies, just as in the original timeline, though the Ravenclaw captain seemed slightly less dazed by her presence this time around. Catching Harry's eye across the crowd, Fleur gave him a subtle nod of acknowledgement. They had agreed to maintain public formality to avoid raising suspicions about their alliance. "Champions over here, please!" Professor McGonagall called, gesturing to where Cedric and Cho were already waiting. "That's us," Harry murmured to Hermione, guiding her through the crowd. As they took their place in line, Cedric leaned over slightly. "Nice robes, Potter. You clean up well." "Thanks," Harry replied with a friendly nod. "Looking forward to the dance?" "More nervous about not tripping over my own feet," Cedric admitted with a good-natured smile. "Fancy footwork on a broom doesn't seem to translate to the dance floor." Harry laughed. "Just follow the music and you'll be fine." When Crumb arrived with his date, a pretty Beauxbatons girl Harry didn't recognize, the Bulgarian seeker gave Harry a respectful nod. Their flying session after Harry's conversation with him in the library had gone well, establishing a friendly rivalry that hadn't existed in the original timeline. As the doors to the Great Hall swung open, revealing the Winter Wonderland transformation inside, Harry took a deep breath. The first phase of the evening was about to begin. The Champions' dance went much more smoothly than in Harry's original experience. His adult mind had no trouble remembering the steps he'd been taught, and he guided Hermione confidently around the floor, earning appreciative murmurs from the watching crowd. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Hermione whispered, clearly impressed as Harry executed a perfect turn. "Let's just say I've been practicing," Harry replied with a smile, spinning her gracefully. As the first dance ended and other students joined them on the floor, Harry continued dancing with Hermione through several more songs before guiding her toward the refreshment table. "Mind if I get some air for a moment?" he asked as he handed her a glass of punch. "These robes are warmer than they look." "Of course," Hermione replied, still flushed from dancing. I'll wait here. Harry made his way through the crowd, nodding greetings to friends and acquaintances from the defense group. When he spotted Daphne standing near one of the ice sculptures, he caught her eye and gave the subtle nod they'd agreed upon. Time for their strategic dance. Approaching her directly, Harry gave a small bow. May I have this dance, Miss Greengrass? Conversation stuttered around them as heads turned. A Gryffindor champion asking a Slytherin to dance was not a common sight at Hogwarts. Daphne, playing her part perfectly, inclined her head regally. You may, Mr. Potter. As Harry led her onto the dance floor, he was acutely aware of the eyes following them, not just students, but professors and visiting officials as well. Exactly as planned? Causing quite a stir, Potter. Daphne murmured as they began to move to the music, her expression carefully neutral despite the whispering around them. That's the idea, Harry replied quietly. Give them something to talk about besides the tournament. They danced in companionable silence for a moment before Daphne spoke again. Pusey overheard something interesting earlier. Karkaroff seems nervous, keeps checking his left forearm when he thinks no one is watching. Harry nodded slightly, unsurprised. Karkaroff's dark mark would be growing clearer as Voldemort grew stronger, just as in the original timeline. Not unexpected, he said, executing a turn that brought them closer to the edge of the dance floor, where they could speak more privately. Anything else? Just rumors, Daphne replied, lowering her voice further. But there's talk of a ministry official arriving after the holidays. Someone sent specifically to observe you. This was new. In the original timeline, Umbridge hadn't arrived until the following year. Another ripple effect from his changes. Any idea who? Harry asked, keeping his expression pleasantly neutral for any observers. Someone named Umbridge, apparently. From the minister's office. Harry fought to keep his face from showing the dismay he felt. Dolores Umbridge arriving early was not a development he had anticipated, though perhaps he should have. His unusual behavior and advanced magical abilities would naturally draw the ministry's attention sooner in this timeline. That complicates things, he admitted. Daphne studied his face. You know this person? By reputation, Harry hedged. Not someone who appreciates students stepping outside expected boundaries. The dance was ending, and they needed to wrap up their conversation before it appeared too intense for a casual partnership. Thank you for the dance, Miss Greengrass, Harry said more loudly as the music faded. It's good to see Hogwarts houses coming together during the tournament. Indeed, Mr. Potter, Daphne replied with equal formality. Perhaps there's hope for school unity after all. As they parted ways, Harry caught Dumbledore watching them from the staff table, a thoughtful expression on his face. Good. Let the headmaster see that Harry was building bridges between houses. It aligned with Dumbledore's own values while advancing Harry's separate agenda. Harry made his way back to Hermione, who was now chatting with Ginny and Neville. Sorry for the delay, he said as he rejoined them. Got caught up in champion duties. Dancing with Greengrass? Ginny asked, her eyebrows raised. That was unexpected. Inter-house cooperation, Harry explained with a casual shrug. Same principle as the defense group. We're all Hogwarts students first, houses second. Hermione was watching him with that perceptive look again. That was more than just school spirit, Harry. That was a statement. Harry smiled slightly. She really did miss nothing. Maybe. But a good one, don't you think? Before Hermione could respond, a flash of silver caught Harry's attention. Fleur was moving toward the gardens, alone. The timing was perfect for their prearranged meeting. Would you excuse me for just a few more minutes? Harry asked apologetically. I promised Professor Flitwick I'd speak with him about something. It was a weak excuse, but Harry was already moving away, weaving through the crowd toward the garden doors. He'd make it up to Hermione later. Right now, he needed to compare notes with Fleur. The enchanted gardens were dotted with fairy lights, illuminating winding paths between rose bushes and ornamental stone benches. Harry followed the path Fleur had taken, eventually finding her in a small clearing, seated on a bench partially hidden from the main paths. "Your timing is impeccable," she commented as he approached. "I was beginning to think you hadn't seen me leave." "I noticed," Harry assured her, taking a seat beside her. "Interesting developments tonight. Daphne Greengrass just informed me that Dolores Umbridge will be arriving after the holidays to observe me." Fleur frowned. "The ministry official you mentioned? The one who caused so much trouble in your 5th year?" "The same," Harry confirmed grimly. "Her early arrival suggests the timeline is shifting more dramatically than I anticipated. The ministry is already suspicious of my abilities. Is this dangerous to your plans?" Fleur asked, her blue eyes concerned in the fairy light. Harry considered the question carefully. "Not necessarily dangerous, but definitely complicating. Umbridge has a talent for causing problems and restricting student activities. She might try to shut down the defense group. Then we must ensure it is too valuable to shut down," Fleur said decisively. "Perhaps official endorsement from Madame Maxime and Karkaroff? Frame it as international magical cooperation, something the ministry would be reluctant to oppose publicly." Harry nodded appreciatively. "That's brilliant, actually. Fudge is obsessed with appearances. If the defense group becomes a showcase of international relations, he'll be less likely to interfere." They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment before Fleur spoke again. "I've been thinking about the second task. In your original timeline, what was taken from you? The thing you would miss most?" "Ron," Harry replied. "My best friend." Fleur nodded slowly. "And for me, it was my sister, Gabrielle." She looked at him curiously. "But now, with the changes you've made, the connections are different. Your relationships have shifted. I wonder if their choices will reflect that." It was an insightful observation, one Harry hadn't considered. With his expanded network of close allies and the different dynamic with Hermione, would the tournament organizers still choose Ron as his hostage? "We'll find out soon enough," Harry said. "Though I'm more concerned about the third task. That's where everything went wrong last time." "The Portkey," Fleur murmured. "To the graveyard." "Exactly," Harry confirmed. "I've been feeding Dumbledore information through my supposed dreams, making him suspicious about the tournament's security. But I need to be prepared in case those precautions aren't enough." "What do you need from me?" Fleur asked directly. "For now, just continue training. And perhaps—" Harry was cut off by the sound of approaching voices and rustling from a nearby rosebush. Acting quickly, he pulled Fleur closer, as if they'd been caught in a private moment rather than a strategic conversation. She understood immediately, leaning into him as Snape and Karkaroff rounded the corner, apparently in the middle of a heated discussion. "Cannot ignore it, Severus," Karkaroff was saying, his voice tense. "You feel it too, I know you do." Both men stopped abruptly at the sight of Harry and Fleur in apparent embrace on the bench. Snape's expression darkened with suspicion. "Mr. Potter," he said coldly. "Miss Delacour. The gardens are not intended for private activities. Return to the Great Hall immediately." "Of course, Professor," Harry replied, standing and offering Fleur his hand with deliberate formality. "We were just getting some air." The hall was rather warm. Snape's eyes narrowed, clearly not believing the innocent explanation, but Karkaroff was already pulling him away, still intent on their conversation. As the professors moved out of earshot, Fleur gave Harry an amused look. "Quick thinking. It seemed better than being caught discussing time travel and Voldemort's resurrection plans," Harry replied dryly. "Indeed." Fleur smoothed her silvery robes. "Though now the rumor mill will likely add me to your list of romantic entanglements." Harry grimaced slightly. "Sorry about that. I didn't think about the implications." "Do not apologize," Fleur said with a dismissive wave. "I have dealt with worse rumors. Besides," she added with a hint of mischief, "it might be useful for people to think we are closer than mere competitors." As they made their way back toward the Great Hall, Harry found himself wondering about the overheard conversation between Snape and Karkaroff. It had played out similarly to his original timeline, Karkaroff panicking about the darkening dark mark, seeking reassurance from Snape. But this time, Harry understood the full context, including Snape's true allegiances. Back in the Great Hall, Harry returned to Hermione, who gave him a questioning look. Flitwick keeps you talking for quite a while. Sorry, Harry said, genuinely apologetic. Got sidetracked. How about another dance to make up for it? Hermione accepted his hand, but as they moved back to the dance floor, Harry could tell she wasn't entirely satisfied with his explanation. Her perceptiveness was both a blessing and a complication. Harry valued her intelligence enormously, but it made keeping his time traveler status secret increasingly difficult. As the evening progressed, Harry continued his strategic socializing. A brief conversation with Cedric about advanced shield charms, a respectful exchange with Professor McGonagall about transfiguration theory, and even a carefully neutral interaction with Draco Malfoy that left the Slytherin looking confused rather than antagonistic. Each interaction was calculated to reinforce the image Harry was cultivating, a mature, capable young wizard who transcended typical house rivalries and commanded respect through ability rather than fame. By the time the ball wound down shortly after midnight, Harry was mentally exhausted from the constant performance, though outwardly he maintained his composed demeanor. As he and Hermione walked back toward Gryffindor Tower, he finally allowed himself to relax slightly. You were different tonight, Hermione said suddenly, breaking their comfortable silence. Not just the dancing or the robes. The way you carried yourself, the way you spoke to people. She looked at him directly. It was like watching someone much older in a younger body. Harry's pulse quickened at how close her observation came to the truth. I've had to grow up fast, I suppose. It's more than that, Hermione persisted. You knew exactly what to say to everyone. Even Professor Vector. I heard you discussing arithmetic theory with her. You've never taken arithmancy, Harry. I read, Harry replied, trying to sound casual. With the tournament and everything, I've been studying more broadly. Hermione stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Harry, we're friends. Best friends. You can tell me if something's going on. If something's changed with you. For a moment, Harry was tempted, so tempted, to tell her everything. Of all people, Hermione would be most likely to believe him, to understand the implications of time travel. But the risks still outweighed the benefits. The fewer people who knew the full truth, the less chance of temporal complications or the information reaching the wrong ears. I'm still me, Hermione, he said softly, taking her hand. Just focused. Determined. The tournament made me realize I need to take things more seriously. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Just a selective truth. Hermione studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. I just want you to know you can trust me. With anything. I know, Harry assured her, squeezing her hand gently. And I do trust you. More than anyone. When they reached the fat lady's portrait, Harry hesitated, then leaned down to kiss Hermione's cheek. Thank you for being my date tonight. It was perfect. Hermione blushed slightly. It was, wasn't it? Despite your mysterious disappearances. Her tone was teasing, but her eyes still held questions. Inside the common room, they said their goodnights and headed to their respective dormitories. As Harry changed out of his dress robes, his mind raced with the evening's developments. Umbridge's early arrival would complicate matters, but Fleur's suggestion about international endorsement for the defense group might neutralize that threat. More concerning were the growing temporal tears Luna had warned him about. If they continued to increase in size and intensity with each change he made, what would happen when he prevented the most significant event of all, Voldemort's resurrection? As he lay in bed, listening to Ron's quiet snores from the next bed, Harry found himself wondering if his changes were actually creating a better timeline, or simply a different one with its own set of challenges. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. But there was no turning back now. He had committed to this path, and he would see it through, whatever the consequences. The holidays passed quickly, with Harry using the break to intensify his preparations. The room of requirement became his personal training ground, where he practiced advanced combat magic away from curious eyes. Sometimes Fleur joined him, sometimes Luna. Occasionally both, though their different approaches to magic made for interesting training sessions. Luna's dreamy perspective and intuitive understanding of magical theory complemented Fleur's precise, academically rigorous approach. Together, they helped Harry refine spells and techniques he would need in the challenges ahead. When classes resumed in January, the castle buzzed with a new rumor. A ministry official would be arriving to observe the tournament more closely. Harry, forewarned by Daphne, was prepared when Dumbledore made the announcement at breakfast 3 days after the start of term. "As some of you may have heard," the headmaster said, his tone carefully neutral, "the ministry has expressed interest in observing our historic tournament more directly. Therefore, I am pleased to welcome Madame Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister, who will be joining us for the remainder of the school year." Harry's eyes fixed on the toad-like woman in pink who sat beside Dumbledore, her simpering smile not reaching her cold eyes. Just the sight of her brought back memories of blood quills and educational decrees, of persecution and pain inflicted with bureaucratic precision. "This is bad," Ron muttered beside him. "Dad says she's horrible, hates anything not pure-blooded and human." "We'll manage," Harry replied quietly, his mind already racing with contingency plans. After breakfast, Harry made his way to his first class of the day, potions with the Slytherins. As he passed the corridor near the dungeons, a now familiar shimmering caught his eye. Another temporal tear, this one smaller than the one by the lake but definitely new. Harry glanced around to ensure he was alone before approaching it cautiously. Within the shimmering distortion, he could make out ghostly images, himself and the Slytherins in a typical confrontational scene from his original timeline, with Malfoy taunting and Harry responding angrily. The Harry in the vision looked younger somehow, less confident, more reactive. It was strange watching this echo of his former self, like seeing a younger brother he'd never had. The contrast between that Harry and his current self was stark, a tangible representation of how much had changed, both externally and internally. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Luna's dreamy voice came from behind him. "Watching what might have been." Harry turned, not entirely surprised by her appearance. Luna seemed to have an uncanny ability to find him near temporal anomalies. "It's unsettling," he admitted. "Seeing how differently I behaved before." "Before is a relative term when time folds back on itself," Luna observed, stepping closer to examine the tear. "This one formed because of your changed relationship with the Slytherins. The timeline expected conflict here, but found cooperation instead." Harry nodded thoughtfully. His strategic alliance with Daphne, Blaise, and other moderate Slytherins had dramatically altered the house dynamic from his original timeline. "There are more of them appearing," Luna continued, her voice taking on an unusual urgency. "All over the castle. Mostly small, but some are growing. Especially the one by the lake." "Growing? How much?" "Large enough that I'm concerned," Luna replied, which from her was extremely significant. "The boundaries between then and now are stretching thin in places. I've started feeling echoes. Emotional residue from events that never happened in this timeline." Harry frowned. "Is that dangerous?" "I'm not sure," Luna admitted. "But I think we should avoid the largest tiers until we understand more. Especially during magically significant moments." "Like the tasks?" Harry concluded grimly. Luna nodded. "The second task involves the lake, where the largest tear is forming. It might be unpredictable." Before Harry could respond, voices approached from around the corner. The tear faded from his perception as his attention shifted, though Luna continued to stare at the spot for a moment longer. "We'll talk more later," Harry whispered as Malfoy and his cronies rounded the corner, followed by other Slytherins heading to potions. To Harry's surprise, Malfoy didn't immediately launch into his usual sneering comments. Instead, the blonde Slytherin eyed him with wary calculation, another change from the original timeline. Harry's demonstrated magical abilities and growing network of allies from all houses had altered the power dynamic, making Malfoy more cautious in his antagonism. Potions class itself proceeded with the usual Snape-led tension, though even the potions master seemed to treat Harry somewhat differently now, less openly hostile, more watchfully suspicious. Harry worked diligently on his strengthening solution, drawing on knowledge from years beyond his apparent age to produce a nearly perfect potion. When Snape passed his cauldron, the professor paused, black eyes narrowing at the textbook perfect results. "Apparently fame isn't everything after all, Potter," he muttered before moving on without his usual cutting remarks. Small victory, but Harry would take it. After classes, Harry made his way to the defense group meeting, now officially renamed Inter-School Magical Defense Association, at Hermione's suggestion. The new name emphasized the international aspect, which would be crucial for Fleur's plan to secure official endorsement from the school heads. When Harry arrived at their usual classroom, he found it already filling with students from all three schools. The group had grown substantially since its inception, now numbering over 50 regular participants. More surprisingly, Professors McGonagall and Flitwick had started attending occasionally, ostensibly to observe but often contributing valuable insights. Today, however, a new observer stood near the door, Dolores Umbridge, clipboard in hand, sickly sweet smile fixed in place. "Mr. Potter," she said as Harry entered, her girlish voice exactly as grating as he remembered. "How interesting to find you leading this little club." "It's more of a study group, Madam Umbridge," Harry replied politely, suppressing years of accumulated loathing. "Professor Moody supervises, and we focus on practical defense applications." "I see," she simpered, making a note on her clipboard. "And the minister will be most interested to hear that students from all three schools participate." Such initiative from someone so young. The threat was subtle but clear. Harry maintained his composure, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. "We're honored by your interest," he said smoothly. "Perhaps you'd like to observe today's session? We're covering shield charms, particularly useful for magical law enforcement, which I know the Ministry values highly." The strategic mention of the Ministry's priorities wasn't lost on Umbridge, whose smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Indeed. I shall observe." As the session began, Harry was acutely aware of Umbridge's beady eyes following his every move. He had deliberately planned a less controversial lesson for today, focusing on defensive rather than offensive magic to avoid giving her immediate ammunition against the group. The Protego charm is the foundation of magical self-defense, Harry explained to the assembled students. But it's only effective if cast properly and with sufficient power. Let's review the wand movement once more. He demonstrated the precise flick and twist required, watching as students mimicked his movements. Years of teaching Dumbledore's army in his original timeline, followed by Auror training and mentoring, had made Harry an effective instructor. Now pair up and practice, he continued. One person casting minor jinxes, the other blocking with Protego. Remember, the shield's strength depends on your focus and intent. As students began practicing, Harry moved among them, offering corrections and encouragement. He deliberately approached the Durmstrang students first, where Krum was demonstrating a particularly powerful shield variant to his classmates. "That's an excellent modification," Harry commented. "The Eastern European twist at the end adds stability to the shield, doesn't it?" Krum nodded, looking pleased that Harry had recognized the technique. "Yes. My grandfather taught me. Less magical drain for longer duration." "Would you mind demonstrating for the group later?" Harry asked. Different regional variations can be incredibly valuable. This approach, highlighting international magical cooperation and encouraging knowledge sharing, was calculated to make it difficult for Umbridge to object to the group's activities. From the corner of his eye, Harry could see her scribbling notes, her expression sour. Next, Harry moved to where Fleur was working with a group of Beauxbatons and Ravenclaw students. Her shield charm had a distinctive silvery quality that reflected her partial Vila heritage. "Beautiful work," Harry said sincerely. "The French technique emphasizes deflection rather than absorption, right?" "Oui," Fleur confirmed. "It requires less power but more precision." Would you like me to show the others? That would be fantastic. Harry agreed. Maybe after Crumb's demonstration? By the time the session ended, students from all 3 schools had shared variations of shield charms, creating an atmosphere of collaborative learning that even Umbridge would find difficult to criticize openly. As students filed out, chatting enthusiastically about the techniques they'd learned, Harry approached the ministry official directly. Thank you for observing, Madam Umbridge. I hope you found the session educational. Umbridge's smile didn't reach her eyes. Quite illuminating, Mr. Potter. Though I wonder why a 4th-year student feels qualified to instruct others in defensive magic. Surely that's best left to professionals. I completely agree, Harry replied smoothly. That's why Professor Moody supervises all our sessions. And why we encourage input from experts like Crumb, whose family has a distinguished tradition in defensive magic, and Fleur Delacour, whose academic standing at Beauxbatons is exceptional. The false Moody, who had been watching the exchange with his magical eye swiveling wildly, stumped over to join them. Potter's got a natural talent for defense, he growled. Best in his year, maybe better. No harm in students practicing together under proper supervision. Umbridge's nostrils flared slightly at being contradicted. Yes, well, the ministry maintains a keen interest in the educational standards at Hogwarts, particularly in sensitive subjects like defensive magic. Of course, Harry agreed pleasantly. Which is why we're so pleased you could observe today. Perhaps you'd like to attend the next session as well? Headmaster Karkaroff and Madame Maxime will be visiting to review their students' progress. An excellent opportunity for the ministry to demonstrate its support for international magical cooperation. The trap was set. If Umbridge declined, she would appear unsupportive of international relations. If she attended, her presence would implicitly endorse the group's activities. How thoughtful, she replied, her voice strained. I shall consider it. As she waddled away, clutching her clipboard, the false Moody gave Harry a considering look. Clever maneuvering, Potter. Very clever indeed. Almost. Slytherin. The Sorting Hat did consider Slytherin for me, Harry replied truthfully, watching for the reaction. The disguised Crouch Jr. couldn't hide his surprise, his magical eyes spinning rapidly. Did it now? Interesting. He studied Harry for a moment longer. You're not what anyone expected, Potter. Remember that can be both an advantage and a danger. With that cryptic warning, the Death Eater in disguise clunked away, leaving Harry to ponder the implications. Crouch Jr. would definitely report this development to Voldemort. The Dark Lord's plans were based on expectations of how Harry would behave. Expectations that were increasingly inaccurate in this timeline. Good. Confusion in the enemy camp could only help Harry's cause. Later that evening, Harry met with Fleur, Luna, and to his mild surprise, Hermione in the room of requirement. He hadn't invited Hermione, but she had cornered him after dinner, insisting on knowing more about his secret meetings. Rather than lie directly, Harry had brought her along, figuring her analytical mind might actually help with their temporal tear problem, even if she didn't know the full context. This room is amazing, Hermione breathed as they entered the space Harry had requested, a comfortable study with bookshelves, a roaring fire, and comfortable chairs. How did you find it? Luna showed me, Harry replied truthfully, gesturing to the blonde Ravenclaw who was already examining the bookshelves. It becomes whatever you need it to be. I've read about theoretical spaces like this in Hogwarts, a history, Hermione said excitedly. But I thought they were just legends. Many legends have factual foundations, Luna commented dreamily, selecting a book on temporal magic that Harry suspected the room had provided specifically for their situation. Reality is just consensus perception, after all. Fleur arrived moments later, her eyebrows rising slightly at Hermione's presence but adapting smoothly. Bonsoir, everyone. I see we have a new participant. Hermione has an exceptional mind for magical theory, Harry explained. I thought she might help with our research project. Research project? Hermione repeated, looking between them curiously. What exactly are you researching? Harry hesitated, trying to formulate a version of the truth that wouldn't reveal his time travel. We've been observing some unusual magical phenomena around Hogwarts. Disturbances that seem to show alternative versions of events. Like divination? Hermione asked skeptically. Not predictions, Luna corrected, settling into an armchair with her selected book. Reflections. Echoes of paths not taken. That's not very clear, Hermione said, frowning. Perhaps a demonstration would be more effective, Fleur suggested, looking to Harry for approval. Harry nodded slowly. There's a small one forming in this room, actually. I noticed it when we entered. He pointed to a corner where, visible only to him and Luna, a small shimmering distortion was forming. Luna, can you see it? Oh yes, Luna confirmed, gazing at the spot. It's quite clear. Showing an alternative version of this meeting, I think. Hermione looked between them, clearly confused. I don't see anything. Most people can't, Harry explained. Luna has a unique perception and I. He paused, considering his words. I have a connection to these phenomena because of my unusual magical signature. It was a half-truth that Hermione might accept without immediately jumping to time travel. These disturbances, Harry continued, seem to be growing larger and more numerous. We're trying to understand what they are and whether they pose any danger. Fascinating, Hermione murmured, her academic curiosity clearly piqued despite her skepticism. What do they show exactly? Events that could have happened but didn't. Luna replied simply. Different choices, different outcomes? That sounds like parallel universe theory, Hermione said thoughtfully. There's some theoretical work on that in advanced arithmancy, the mathematical possibility of multiple timelines existing simultaneously. Harry exchanged a quick glance with Fleur. Trust Hermione to immediately grasp the underlying concept. Yes, something like that, Harry agreed. The question is why these windows into alternative possibilities are appearing, and whether they might become unstable. For the next hour, they discussed theories about the temporal tiers, with Hermione contributing surprisingly helpful insights despite not being able to see them herself. Her logical approach complemented Luna's intuitive understanding perfectly. If these phenomena are increasing in frequency and size, Hermione reasoned, there must be a catalyst. Some magical event that disturbed the normal flow of time or reality. Harry kept his expression carefully neutral. That's what we're trying to determine. The tournament itself involves powerful magic, Fleur suggested, helping to redirect Hermione's line of thinking. Ancient binding spells, magical contracts. Perhaps something in the goblet's magic has created these disturbances. That's possible, Hermione acknowledged, though she still looked thoughtful. But it doesn't explain why Harry and Luna can see them while others can't. Some magical sensitivities are innate, Luna said serenely. Like being able to see thestrals after witnessing death. Before Hermione could press further, Harry decided to change tack slightly. There's something else we should discuss, the second task. It's approaching quickly, and according to the egg's clue, it takes place in the lake, where the largest disturbance is located. Luna added, looking directly at Harry. That could be problematic. What do you mean? Hermione asked, looking between them. The lake tear is substantial, Luna explained. If a magically charged event like a tournament task occurs near it, the interaction could be unpredictable. What exactly could happen? Fleur asked, concern evident in her voice. Luna shrugged slightly. I'm not entirely sure. But at minimum, it might make the task more dangerous than intended. At worst. At worst? Harry prompted when she didn't continue. At worst, the boundaries between what is and what might have been could temporarily collapse, Luna said simply. Elements from the alternative timeline might manifest in this one. Hermione looked thoroughly skeptical now. That sounds rather far-fetched. Many true things do, Luna replied without offense. Harry intervened before the discussion could derail further. Whether or not that's possible, we should prepare for the task as thoroughly as we can. Fleur and I will be competing, and the lake in February will be dangerous enough without any additional complications. They spent the remainder of the meeting discussing practical preparations for underwater survival. Gillyweed for Harry, the bubblehead charm for Fleur. Hermione, despite her continued skepticism about the temporal disturbances, contributed enthusiastically to this more concrete planning. When they finally adjourned for the night, Harry asked Fleur to stay behind for a moment. Once the others had left, he turned to her with a serious expression. Luna's not exaggerating about the lake tear. It's massive, and it's growing. If she's right about temporal elements crossing over during the task, it could create chaos. Fleur finished for him, her expression grave. Do you think we should try to postpone the task? Harry shook his head. They wouldn't agree without a concrete reason, and we can't exactly explain about temporal tears only two people can see. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. No, we need to prepare for whatever might happen. And I need to warn Cedric and Crumb somehow, without revealing too much. Perhaps frame it as a concern about the lake itself? Fleur suggested. Magical creatures or unstable areas that could be dangerous? That might work. Harry agreed. I'll find a way to speak with them tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Fleur touched his arm lightly. Be careful, Harry. These changes you are making, they are necessary, I believe that. But the consequences are becoming more unpredictable. I know, Harry acknowledged, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. But I can't stop now. Too much depends on changing what's to come. Fleur studied his face for a moment, then nodded. Then we face it together. Whatever comes. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparation, both for the second task and for the growing complications of Harry's altered timeline. Umbridge's presence became increasingly intrusive as she attended classes, questioned students about their activities, and inserted herself into school operations with thinly veiled ministry authority. Predictably, she had taken a particular interest in Harry's defense group, though the planned observation by Karkaroff and Madame Maxime had successfully boxed her into reluctant tolerance. For now. More concerning were Luna's reports of the growing temporal tear at the lake. According to her, it had expanded to roughly the size of a house, though still invisible to most observers. Occasionally, students reported strange sightings near the lake, glimpses of people who weren't there, sounds with no apparent source, brief moments of disorientation. The boundary between timelines was wearing thin. 2 days before the second task, Harry was studying in the library when Professor McGonagall approached his table. Mr. Potter, she said quietly, the headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately. Harry nodded, gathering his books. Is everything all right, Professor? That is for the headmaster to discuss, McGonagall replied, her expression giving nothing away. The password is Fizzing Wisby. As Harry made his way to Dumbledore's office, his mind raced with possibilities. In the original timeline, he hadn't had many private meetings with Dumbledore until after Voldemort's resurrection. This was another deviation, potentially significant. The gargoyle leapt aside at the password, and Harry ascended the spiral staircase to find Dumbledore seated behind his desk, his expression grave. More surprisingly, Professor Snape stood by the window, his back to the room. "Ah, Harry! Thank you for coming so promptly," Dumbledore said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. "Please sit down." Harry took the offered seat, maintaining a carefully neutral expression despite his curiosity. "You wanted to see me, Professor?" "Indeed." Dumbledore studied him over his half-moon spectacles. "I find myself in the unusual position of having questions that only you might be able to answer, Harry." Harry felt a flutter of apprehension. Had Dumbledore somehow discovered his secret? "Sir?" "Your dreams, Harry, the ones you've shared with me about Voldemort's plans. They have proven remarkably accurate." Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. "Almost prescient, one might say." Harry maintained his composure. "I don't understand them myself, sir. They just come to me. Through my scar, I think." Snape turned from the window at this, his black eyes boring into Harry's. "And yet, Potter, your reactions to these supposed visions are curious. Not fear or confusion, as one might expect from a 14-year-old experiencing such things, but rather preparation. Calculated responses. So that was it. His behavior had raised suspicions, exactly as he'd anticipated it might eventually. Harry decided on a partial truth. The dreams feel real, Professor. So real that I can't just ignore them or hope they're wrong. He met Dumbledore's gaze directly. After everything that's happened in the past 3 years at Hogwarts, I decided being prepared is better than being caught off guard again. Dumbledore nodded slowly. A mature approach, certainly. But it doesn't explain certain inconsistencies we've observed. Inconsistencies? Harry repeated, careful to sound merely curious rather than defensive. Your sudden aptitude for advanced magic. Snape interjected coldly. Your changed demeanor. Your unexpected political maneuvering among the houses. Your resistance to Moody's imperious curse. All occurring after the summer holiday, with no gradual development. Harry had prepared for this line of questioning, knowing it would come eventually. I had a sort of awakening over the summer, he said carefully. The dreams started, and with them came a clearer understanding of magic, of what's at stake. It's hard to explain. Try. Dumbledore encouraged gently. Harry took a deep breath, offering a version of the truth that might satisfy without revealing too much. It was like something unlocked in my mind. Suddenly spells made more sense, magical theory clicked into place. And along with that came these visions of Voldemort, of his plans. He looked down at his hands. I think when he tried to kill me as a baby, he created a connection between us. And that connection is getting stronger as he gets stronger. This explanation aligned with what Dumbledore already believed about the Horcrux connection, while providing a plausible reason for Harry's increased magical ability. Dumbledore and Snape exchanged a significant look before the headmaster spoke again. Such a connection would be unprecedented, Harry. And potentially dangerous, for both parties. I know, Harry agreed soberly. That's why I've been studying occlumency, trying to protect my mind. Snape's eyebrows rose fractionally at this. Occlumency is beyond the capabilities of most adult wizards, Potter, let alone untrained teenagers. I found references to it in the library. Harry explained another partial truth. And it seemed logical that mind protection would help with this connection. Most logical. Dumbledore murmured, still studying Harry intently. And your defense group? Your efforts at Interhouse Unity? Are these also responses to your dreams? Harry nodded. The visions suggest Voldemort wants to divide us, to isolate me. So I'm doing the opposite, building connections, preparing people. He met Dumbledore's gaze steadily. In the dreams, he returns to power, Professor. And when he does, we'll need to be ready. A heavy silence fell over the office. Fawkes trilled softly from his perch, the phoenix's song seeming to ease the tension slightly. Finally, Dumbledore spoke again. I believe you are being truthful, Harry, at least partially so. But I sense you are still keeping something significant to yourself. Harry didn't deny it. Some burdens aren't meant to be shared, Professor. At least not yet. Surprisingly, this seemed to satisfy Dumbledore, who nodded slowly. I understand the weight of keeping difficult truths, Harry. Perhaps better than most. He straightened in his chair. Very well. For now, I will accept your explanation, incomplete though it may be. But I ask that you continue to share your visions with me, and that you exercise extreme caution in your preparations. I will, Harry promised sincerely. There is one more matter, Dumbledore continued, his tone shifting slightly. Professor Snape has agreed, at my request, to assist you with proper occlumency training. Given the connection you describe, formal instruction would be beneficial. This was unexpected. In the original timeline, occlumency lessons with Snape hadn't begun until after Christmas of his 5th year, and they had been an unmitigated disaster. But now, with his adult mind and years of mental discipline, Harry could actually benefit from proper instruction, even from Snape. Thank you, sir, Harry said, glancing at Snape, who looked thoroughly displeased with the arrangement. "I appreciate the opportunity. Professor Snape will contact you to arrange suitable times," Dumbledore concluded. "And Harry? Do be careful with the second task. The lake can be unpredictable." Something in Dumbledore's tone made Harry wonder if the headmaster somehow sensed a temporal disturbance, despite not being able to see it directly. "I will, Professor," Harry assured him, rising from his chair. "Thank you for your concern." As Harry descended the spiral staircase, his mind was already racing with implications. Dumbledore and Snape were suspicious, but not in a hostile way, more concerned than antagonistic. The offer of occlumency lessons was actually helpful, giving Harry a legitimate reason to have advanced mental discipline. But the conversation had confirmed something important. His behavior was noticeable enough to draw attention from the most observant wizards in the castle. He would need to be even more careful going forward, balancing his preparations with maintaining a plausible cover story. The second task was approaching rapidly, and with it, the next major test of his altered timeline. The lake tear posed an unpredictable variable, one that could potentially derail his carefully laid plans if Luna's warnings proved accurate. Harry needed to prepare for every possibility, including temporal anomalies that even he couldn't fully anticipate. The morning of the second task dawned cold and foggy, the lake a flat, steel-gray expanse beneath an overcast sky. Harry stood at the water's edge with the other champions, scanning the crowd gathered on the shore. He had noticed Hermione's absence the previous evening, confirming his suspicion that she would be his hostage this time rather than Ron. Another change to the original timeline, small but significant in what it revealed about the perception of his closest relationships. Fleur stood nearby, her face pale but determined. She had been briefed thoroughly on what to expect, including Harry's knowledge that her sister Gabrielle would be her hostage. Cedric and Krum looked focused, unaware of the invisible temporal tear that Luna had reported now stretched across nearly a quarter of the lake's surface. Speaking of Luna, Harry spotted her in the crowd, her distinctive radish earrings visible even at a distance. She wasn't watching the champions or the judges, but staring intently at a point over the lake where, presumably, the tear was most prominent. Ludo Bagman's magically amplified voice boomed across the grounds. "Welcome to the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. Our champions must recover what has been taken from them, something they will sorely miss, from the bottom of the lake. They have precisely 1 hour to complete this task." As Bagman continued explaining the rules, Harry discreetly pulled the gillyweed from his pocket. Unlike his original timeline, where he'd received it from Dobby at the last minute, this time he had prepared well in advance, consulting with Neville about the optimal dosage. When the cannon sounded, Harry quickly swallowed the slimy plant, feeling the familiar but unpleasant sensation of gills forming along his neck and his hands and feet transforming into web appendages. Without hesitation, he dove into the frigid water. The underwater world was exactly as he remembered it, murky green, filled with swaying weeds and darting fish. Harry oriented himself quickly, heading directly toward the Merpeople village rather than wasting time searching. What wasn't familiar, however, was the strange shimmering he could see about 50 yards to his right, an underwater manifestation of the temporal tear, visible even through the murky water. Harry deliberately swam a wide arc around it, unwilling to discover what might happen if he passed through. The journey to the Merpeople village was largely uneventful. Harry easily avoided the Grindylows that had given him trouble in his original timeline, using a powerful relatio spell to scatter them before they could swarm him. As he approached the village center, the haunting sound of the Merpeople's song grew louder. There, tied to the stone statue, were 4 figures: Hermione, Cho Chang, a small blonde girl who could only be Gabrielle, and surprisingly, a Durmstrang student Harry didn't recognize rather than Ron. Another timeline change, Krum's thing he would sorely miss, was different in this reality. Interesting, but not immediately relevant. Harry checked his watch, modified with a simple charm to function underwater. He had made excellent time, just 20 minutes had elapsed. In his original timeline, he had arrived last after getting lost and helping others. This time, he appeared to be first. Drawing his wand, Harry quickly severed the ropes binding Hermione. As he prepared to carry her to the surface, however, something strange happened. The water around him seemed to shimmer, as if a heat haze had suddenly appeared underwater. The merpeople scattered, clearly alarmed by whatever they were sensing. Harry felt it too, a strange pulling sensation, as if reality itself was thinning. With a jolt of realization, he understood. The temporal tear had expanded, reaching the village. Luna had warned this might happen, the magical energy of the task interacting with the existing tear, causing it to grow or shift. Acting quickly, Harry began swimming upward with Hermione, trying to get clear of the disturbance. But the shimmering followed, expanding outward like ripples in a pond. And then, impossibly, Harry saw himself. Another Harry Potter, younger looking and clearly panicked, appeared through the shimmer. This Harry was struggling with the hostages, trying to free not just Hermione but the others as well, arguing with the merpeople, exactly as had happened in the original timeline. The two Harrys locked eyes across the temporal boundary, both freezing in shock. The other Harry's eyes widened in horrified confusion, his mouth opening in what would have been a shout if they weren't underwater. Harry felt a surge of panic. This was far worse than Luna had predicted, not just objects or emotional echoes crossing the boundary, but actual duplicates of people. If others saw this, if the timelines continued to blur in this way. As if responding to his fear, the shimmer intensified, the boundary between realities becoming more defined rather than less. The merpeople were now actively fleeing the area, their movements frantic. Harry made a split-second decision. Still holding Hermione, he pointed his wand at the apparition of his younger self and the surrounding shimmer. Repello Temporis! He cast, inventing a spell on the spot by combining the standard repelling charm with the Latin for time. It was a desperate move, based more on intent than proper spellcraft. To his amazement, it seemed to work. The shimmering boundary pulsed once, then began to contract, the image of the other Harry growing fainter before disappearing entirely. Within seconds the water returned to its normal murky state, with no sign of the temporal intrusion. Shaken but determined, Harry resumed his ascent, breaking the surface well ahead of the other champions. As they returned to shore, Hermione sputtering awake in the cold air, Harry scanned the crowd anxiously. Had anyone else witnessed the temporal anomaly? His eyes found Luna, who was staring at him with an intensity he'd never seen from her before. She gave him a single, slow nod confirming his fears. The boundary between timelines had indeed thinned dangerously during the task. After the obligatory medical check by Madame Pomfrey and the awarding of points, Harry received full marks for returning first with his hostage unharmed. He managed to pull Luna aside while the crowd's attention was on Fleur's emotional reunion with her sister. "You saw it?" he asked urgently. "Everyone saw something," Luna replied, her dreamy tone subdued. "Most thought it was part of the task, strange lights under the water. But I saw the other you, Harry Potter. The you from before." Harry ran a hand through his wet hair, trying to process the implications. "This is getting more dangerous. If people start seeing duplicates, start questioning reality. The fabric is wearing thin," Luna agreed solemnly. "Your spell helped, but it's temporary. The tears will continue to grow as you make more significant changes." "I can't stop now," Harry said firmly. "Not when we're so close to the critical point." "The third task?" Luna nodded. "The graveyard. The resurrection." "Exactly. If I can prevent that, everything changes." Harry glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "But we need to find a way to manage these tears, or at least predict where they'll form." "I've been researching," Luna said, reaching into her robes to withdraw a small notebook covered in strange symbols. "Temporal theory isn't well documented, but there are patterns. The tears form at points of significant divergence from your original timeline. Places where your changes have most dramatically altered the course of events." "That makes sense," Harry acknowledged. "The first one appeared near where Hagrid would have shown me the dragons. The second near where I would have had confrontations with Malfoy. And the largest at the lake, where your entire approach to the task changed," Luna completed. "Which suggests..." The third task will be the most dangerous yet, Harry concluded grimly. If I'm planning to completely prevent Voldemort's resurrection, the temporal backlash could be catastrophic, Luna finished. Reality itself might fight to maintain what was supposed to happen. A troubling thought occurred to Harry. Luna, what if time won't let me change that night? What if the universe demands Voldemort's return as some sort of fixed point? Luna considered this with unusual seriousness. Not fixed, perhaps, but heavily reinforced. The more significant the event, the stronger the timeline's resistance to change. She studied his face. You may need to allow some aspects to occur as they did before, while changing only the critical elements. Let myself be taken to the graveyard, you mean? Harry asked, his stomach churning at the thought. Face Voldemort again? Perhaps, Luna said softly. But not alone, and not unprepared, as you were before. Before they could discuss further, Fleur approached, her eyes darting meaningfully toward Harry. She had been listening to the judge's final announcements, while keeping Gabrielle wrapped in warm towels. Harry, she greeted, her voice carefully casual for any observers. Thank you again for your advice about the bubblehead charm. It worked perfectly. Glad to hear it, Harry replied, matching her public tone. To Luna, he added, we should continue our discussion about those magical theory questions later. The room 8 o'clock? Luna nodded dreamily, slipping back into her usual demeanor. The Noggles will be especially active tonight. It's a good time for important conversations. As Luna drifted away, Fleur lowered her voice. What happened under the water? I saw a strange light near the village, and the mere people seemed frightened. Temporal breach, Harry explained quietly. Worse than we anticipated. I'll explain everything tonight. Bring your research on protective charms. Fleur nodded, understanding the gravity of his tone. Be careful, Harry. Madame Maxime mentioned that Umbridge was asking very specific questions about you during the task, about your magical abilities and your unusual maturity. Not surprising, Harry sighed. She's been watching me closely since she arrived. It's more than watching now, Fleur warned. She seems to be building some kind of case. Karkaroff overheard her mentioning an investigation to one of the ministry officials. This was concerning but not unexpected. In his original timeline, Umbridge had gone to extreme lengths to discredit and control him. Here, with his more obvious magical advancement and political maneuvering, he had practically painted a target on his back for her suspicions. Thanks for the warning, Harry said. I'll be careful. As students began making their way back to the castle, Harry rejoined Hermione, who was still wrapped in a thick blanket provided by Madame Pomfrey. That was fast work, she commented as they walked. You must have reached us before anyone else by quite a margin. I had a good idea where to look, Harry replied with a casual shrug. And the gillyweed worked perfectly. Hermione studied his face. There was something strange down there, wasn't there? I was unconscious, but when I woke up, everyone was talking about weird lights under the water. Harry hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. There was some kind of magical disturbance. Probably just the task magic interacting with the lake's natural magical field. Hermione didn't look entirely convinced. It reminded me of what you and Luna were discussing, those temporal anomalies you mentioned. Sometimes Hermione's perceptiveness was truly unnerving. Maybe, Harry allowed. We're still researching. As they reached the castle entrance, Harry noticed Dumbledore watching him from a distance, his expression thoughtful. The headmaster had been standing near the judge's table during the underwater disturbance. Had he sensed something more than the others? Another complication to an already complex situation. But Harry couldn't focus on that now. The second task was complete, and he had performed well, maintaining his lead in the tournament while gaining valuable insights about the growing temporal tiers. Now he needed to prepare for the third and most crucial task, the one that would determine whether his mission to change the timeline would succeed or fail catastrophically. And based on today's events, the stakes had just gotten much higher. The weeks following the second task brought new challenges and complications. Umbridge's investigation into Harry's unusual abilities intensified, with the toad-like woman sitting in on more of his classes, questioning his friends, and even attempting to interfere with the defense group meetings. Harry countered her moves carefully, always maintaining a respectful facade while using her own bureaucratic rules against her. When she questioned the legality of the defense group, he produced signed permissions from all 3 headmasters. When she suggested his magic might be unnaturally enhanced, he invited her to consult with Professor Flitwick about the natural development of magical cores in adolescence. It was a delicate game, keeping Umbridge occupied with bureaucratic hurdles while continuing his preparations for the 3rd task. His occlumency lessons with Snape had begun as well, proving to be a very different experience from his original timeline. Instead of the brutal mental assaults he had endured before, these sessions were more structured, with Snape seemingly surprised and suspicious about Harry's already advanced shields. "Your mind is unusually organized for someone your age, Potter," Snape had commented during their 3rd session, his black eyes narrowed. "Almost as if you've had previous training." "I've been practicing since summer," Harry had replied truthfully. When the dreams started, Snape hadn't looked convinced, but he had continued the lessons, gradually increasing the strength of his legilimency attacks. Harry maintained his defenses carefully, allowing Snape to see only selected memories that supported his cover story while keeping his time traveler status hidden behind multiple layers of misdirection. Meanwhile, the temporal tears continued to appear around the castle, though none as dramatic as the underwater breach during the 2nd task. Luna reported smaller disturbances forming in the library, where Harry spent much more time researching than in his original timeline, near the Quidditch pitch, which was being transformed into the maze for the 3rd task, and occasionally in the Great Hall during meals. Most concerning was Luna's observation that the tears were becoming more visible to others. Occasionally students reported seeing strange shimmers, or feeling weird déjà vu, in areas where Harry knew tears had formed. The boundaries between timelines were continuing to thin. In response, Harry, Fleur, and Luna had developed a temporary solution, a modified version of the spell Harry had instinctively cast underwater. By combining elements of repelling charms with magical containment theory, they created a spell that could temporarily stabilize a tear, preventing it from growing or allowing cross-timeline contamination. The spell wasn't permanent. The tears eventually reformed, but it bought them time as they approached the critical juncture of the 3rd task. "It's not a solution," Fleur had pointed out during one of their planning sessions in the room of requirement. "Merely a delay of the inevitable. The more you change, the stronger the temporal resistance becomes." "I know," Harry had acknowledged. "But we just need to hold things together until after the 3rd task. Once we prevent the resurrection, we can focus on finding a permanent solution." Luna, who had been staring dreamily at the ceiling, spoke without looking at them. "Unless preventing the resurrection creates the largest tear of all. A breach that can't be contained." That sobering thought had lingered with Harry ever since, informing his evolving strategy for the 3rd task. Perhaps Luna was right. Perhaps he couldn't simply prevent the ritual from happening without catastrophic temporal consequences. Which meant he might need to allow certain events to unfold similarly to his original timeline, while changing only the critical elements. A dangerous game, but potentially the only viable path forward. On a brisk April evening, as Harry was returning from a particularly grueling occlumency session with Snape, he rounded a corner to find Draco Malfoy waiting for him, alone, a highly unusual circumstance. "Potter," Malfoy said, his typically sneering tone subdued. "A word." Harry paused, instinctively checking for an ambush before focusing on Malfoy. "What is it, Draco?" The use of his first name clearly caught Malfoy off guard, but he recovered quickly. "I've been observing your little defense club. And your political maneuvering with the Slytherins." "And?" Harry prompted, curious where this was going. Malfoy glanced around to ensure they were alone before continuing. "Something's coming, isn't it? Something bigger than this tournament. My father's been unusually active in certain circles lately." Harry studied Malfoy's face, noting the subtle signs of strain around his eyes. This wasn't the confident, bullying Draco from his early Hogwarts years. This Malfoy seemed worried, perhaps even afraid. Yes, Harry confirmed simply. Something is coming. Something that will force everyone to choose sides. Malfoy's jaw tightened. And you're preparing for it. Building alliances across houses, teaching defensive magic, cultivating international connections. He shook his head slightly. Very Slytherin, Potter. I wouldn't have thought you had it in you. The Sorting Hat wanted to put me in Slytherin, Harry revealed, watching Malfoy's eyes widen in genuine shock. I asked it not to. You asked? Malfoy seemed momentarily lost for words. Why are you telling me this? Because you're at a crossroads, Draco, Harry said quietly. Sooner than you think, you'll need to decide where your true loyalties lie. With your family's traditional allegiances, or with your own future. Malfoy's pale face flushed slightly. You don't know anything about my family or our allegiances, Potter. I know more than you think, Harry countered calmly. I know about the diary your father slipped to Ginny Weasley in our second year. I know about his silver mask and black robes. I know about the meetings at your manor during the holidays. Each statement hit Malfoy like a physical blow, his face growing paler with each revelation. How could you possibly? It doesn't matter how I know, Harry interrupted. What matters is what you do with the information. Your father's path leads to destruction, Draco. For him, for your mother, for you. There are other options. Malfoy stared at him, conflicting emotions warring on his pointed face. Why are you doing this? We're not friends. We've never been allies. Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path, Harry replied simply. Even you. For a long moment, Malfoy just looked at him, clearly trying to process this unexpected conversation. Finally, he asked, What exactly are you suggesting, Potter? Nothing yet, Harry said. Just think about where your true interests lie. About what kind of future you want. And when the time comes to make a choice, remember this conversation. With that, Harry continued past Malfoy, leaving the Slytherin standing alone in the corridor, visibly shaken. It was a gamble, approaching Malfoy like this. In the original timeline, Draco had eventually shown reluctance to fully embrace Voldemort's cause, but only after being forced to witness its horrors firsthand. By planting seeds of doubt earlier, Harry hoped to accelerate that realization, potentially saving the Malfoy family from their original fate while depriving Voldemort of resources. Another change to the timeline. Another potential temporal tear forming somewhere in the castle. But Harry couldn't worry about that now. The third task was approaching rapidly, and with it, the critical juncture that would determine whether his mission to change the future would succeed or create a catastrophic temporal backlash. That evening, he met with his core group of confidants in the room of requirement, Fleur, Luna, and now, somewhat surprisingly, Hermione. Though Harry still hadn't revealed his time traveler status to her, Hermione had proven too perceptive and too valuable to exclude from their planning sessions. She now accepted the reality of the temporal tiers, even if she couldn't see them herself, and had contributed valuable research on magical theory that supported their containment efforts. The temporal disturbances are increasing in frequency, Luna reported as they gathered around a map of Hogwarts where they had marked known tear locations. And invisibility. 3 more students reported seeing shimmers today. That's concerning, Hermione said, frowning at the map. The pattern suggests they're concentrating around locations significant to the tournament. Which means the third task will likely trigger the largest disruptions yet. Fleur concluded, her expression grave. Harry nodded, having reached the same conclusion. We need to prepare for significant temporal instability during the maze challenge. Based on the pattern so far, the tiers form where my actions most significantly deviate from their expected path. He was careful with his phrasing, still maintaining the fiction for Hermione that these were anomalies related to the tournament rather than to his time travel. The containment spell is holding for the smaller tiers, Fleur noted, but something of the magnitude we expect during the third task will likely overwhelm any containment we can establish. Luna finished dreamily. The universe doesn't like paradoxes. It tries to resolve them, one way or another. Hermione's analytical mind latched onto this concept. If these disturbances are the universe trying to resolve paradoxical events, then perhaps the solution isn't to fight against them but to work with them. What do you mean? Harry asked, intrigued. Well, Hermione continued, warming to her theory. If certain events are trying to happen because they're somehow fixed points or particularly probable outcomes, maybe we need to allow them to happen in some form, but guide how they unfold. Harry exchanged a quick glance with Fleur and Luna. Hermione had independently arrived at the same conclusion they had been considering. That's an interesting theory, Harry said carefully. How would we apply it practically? Hermione leaned forward, her eyes bright with intellectual excitement. Instead of trying to prevent whatever might happen during the third task, be prepared to channel it in a direction that achieves your goals while still satisfying whatever cosmic balance these tiers represent. Allowing the universe to follow its path while redirecting the river rather than damming it. Luna said approvingly. Elegant. Harry nodded slowly. So for the third task, instead of trying to avoid the maze entirely or prevent the cup from being a portkey, you ensure it takes you somewhere you're prepared to be. Fleur finished, catching on immediately. Somewhere you can control the situation. It was a dangerous strategy, but potentially the only viable one given the increasing temporal instability. Let certain elements of the original timeline play out, the maze, the portkey, perhaps even the journey to the graveyard, but arrive prepared, possibly with allies, ready to change the crucial moment of Voldemort's resurrection. There's one problem, Harry pointed out. We don't know exactly where the portkey leads. In the visions I've had, it's a graveyard, but I don't know which one. This was a genuine limitation. In his original timeline, Harry had never learned the exact location of the Little Hangleton graveyard until years later, during the hunt for Horcruxes. Perhaps that's something your occlumency lessons could help with, Hermione suggested. If these visions are coming through your connection to Voldemort, maybe you could, I don't know, focus them somehow? Get more specific details? It wasn't a bad idea, though not for the reasons Hermione thought. Harry's advanced occlumency might allow him to access memories from his original timeline more precisely, potentially retrieving details about the graveyard that could help locate it. I'll try, he promised. In the meantime, we should prepare for multiple scenarios. The planning session continued late into the night, with each of them taking on specific research assignments. Hermione would investigate magical transportation theory, looking for ways to possibly redirect a portkey. Fleur would work on battle preparation and protective enchantments. Luna would continue monitoring the temporal tiers, tracking their growth patterns to predict the most dangerous areas during the task. And Harry would try to remember every detail of the graveyard and the resurrection ritual, searching for weaknesses they could exploit. As they finally prepared to leave, Hermione pulled Harry aside. I know there's something you're not telling me, she said quietly. Something bigger than just these temporal anomalies. Harry maintained his composure, though internally he acknowledged that Hermione's perceptiveness continued to be both impressive and concerning. What makes you say that? The way you, Fleur, and Luna exchange glances sometimes. The way you talk about events as if you know how they're supposed to unfold. She studied his face intently. It's like you have information the rest of us don't. Information you can't explain how you got. Harry considered his options carefully. Hermione was too smart to be put off with simple denials, and her help was too valuable to lose. Yet revealing his full-time traveler status remained risky, potentially creating even more temporal instability. You're right, he admitted finally. There is more to this situation than I've explained. And I promise, after the third task, I'll tell you everything. But for now, I need you to trust me. Hermione held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. I do trust you, Harry. That's the only reason I'm not demanding answers right now. She squeezed his arm gently. Just be careful. Whatever you're planning, whatever you know, don't face it alone. I won't, Harry promised, grateful for her understanding even without the full context. I've learned that lesson the hard way. As they parted ways, Harry reflected on how different this approach was from his original timeline, where he had often shouldered burdens alone, keeping secrets even from his closest friends. This time, he was deliberately building a network of support, sharing at least parts of the truth with those who could help. It was a better strategy, both tactically and emotionally. But it also created more variables, more potential changes to the timeline, and consequently, more temporal instability. The coming weeks would determine whether his gamble would pay off or whether the fabric of reality itself would unravel under the strain of his attempts to rewrite history. The day before the third task, Harry found himself summoned once again to Dumbledore's office. This time, he was surprised to find not just the headmaster waiting for him, but also Moody, still Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, though only Harry knew that, and most unexpectedly, Cornelius Fudge. "Ah, Harry, thank you for joining us," Dumbledore greeted him, his expression giving nothing away. "I believe you know the Minister for Magic?" "Of course," Harry replied politely, shaking Fudge's hand with appropriate deference. "Good to see you again, Minister." Fudge seemed slightly taken aback by Harry's composed demeanor. "Yes, well. Good to see you too, Potter. Doing well in the tournament, I hear." "I've been fortunate," Harry said modestly, taking the seat Dumbledore indicated. "To what do I owe this meeting?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled slightly at Harry's direct approach. "Minister Fudge has some questions regarding certain activities at Hogwarts this year. Specifically, your defense group and some unusual magical occurrences that have been reported." So Umbridge had elevated her concerns to Fudge directly. Not unexpected, but potentially problematic timing with the third task so close. "I'd be happy to answer any questions about the Interschool Magical Defense Association," Harry said, deliberately using the formal name. "It's been a wonderful opportunity for international magical cooperation." Fudge cleared his throat. "Yes, well, that's part of what concerns us, Potter. Undersecretary Umbridge reports that you're teaching spells well beyond the standard curriculum. Some might say inappropriate for students your age." Harry noticed the false Moody watching this exchange with his magical eye spinning rapidly. The disguised Death Eater was clearly interested in how Harry would navigate this political challenge. "All spells taught in the group are approved by Professor Moody," Harry replied smoothly, gesturing to the Exor. "And the content has been reviewed by Headmasters Dumbledore, Karkaroff, and Madame Maxime. We focus on defensive magic, shields, disarming techniques, evasion tactics. Nothing dark or dangerous." Moody grunted in confirmation. "Boy's telling the truth, Minister. Nothing taught in that group that wouldn't be covered in standard aura training eventually. Just accelerated a bit." Fudge looked disgruntled at having this line of questioning blocked so effectively. "Be that as it may, there's also the matter of these strange occurrences students have reported. Shimmering disturbances, momentary visions, feelings of disorientation. Undersecretary Umbridge believes they may be connected to unauthorized magical experimentation." This was more dangerous territory. Harry chose his words carefully. "I've noticed some unusual magical phenomena myself, Minister. Professor Dumbledore and I have discussed the possibility that they're related to the Triwizard Tournament's ancient magic interacting with Hogwarts' own magical field." He glanced at Dumbledore, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval for this explanation. "Indeed," the headmaster confirmed. "The Goblet of Fire draws on very old magic, Cornelius. Such powerful magical artifacts can sometimes create temporary disturbances in heavily enchanted locations like Hogwarts. Nothing to be concerned about, merely magical theory and practical application." Fudge didn't look entirely convinced, but he seemed reluctant to challenge Dumbledore on matters of magical theory. "Well, if you say so, Albus. Still, these reports are concerning. Students claiming to see double, or glimpsing events that never happened." Harry felt a chill. The temporal tiers were becoming more visible, more intrusive than he had realized. "Magical resonance can sometimes create echoes or illusions," he offered, drawing on terminology he picked up from Hermione's research. "Especially around magical focal points like the goblet." "Quite right, Harry. Dumbledore agreed smoothly. I've observed similar phenomena during previous instances of powerful magical artifacts being brought into the castle. The false Moody was watching Harry with increased intensity now, his magical eye barely blinking. Harry maintained his composed expression, though internally he was concerned about how much the disguised Death Eater might be deducing from this conversation. Well, I still think the whole matter bears watching, Fudge huffed, clearly frustrated at having his concerns dismissed so diplomatically. Especially with the final task tomorrow. We can't have mysterious magical disturbances interfering with such a high-profile event. I assure you, Minister, we've taken every precaution, Dumbledore said calmly. The maze has been thoroughly checked for any anomalies, and additional protective enchantments have been added. This was news to Harry, though he kept his expression neutral. Had Dumbledore been taking extra security measures based on Harry's dream warnings? If so, that could complicate the portkey plan Crouch Jr. had implemented in the original timeline. Is there anything else you'd like to ask me, Minister? Harry inquired politely, wanting to gauge how far Fudge's suspicions extended. Just one thing, Potter, Fudge said, studying him with unusual shrewdness. Undersecretary Umbridge reports that you've shown magical abilities well beyond what would be expected of a fourth-year student. Advanced spellcasting, wandless magic, exceptional defensive capabilities. Some might wonder how you've acquired such precocious talents. It was a leading question, clearly fishing for something that might justify ministry intervention. Harry responded with the same explanation he had given Dumbledore previously. I've always had a natural aptitude for defense against the dark arts, Minister, he said modestly. After being entered into the tournament against my will, I realized I needed to accelerate my studies if I was to have any chance of surviving. The library has excellent advanced texts, and Professors Flitwick and McGonagall have been kind enough to provide additional guidance when asked. The boy's a natural, Moody interjected gruffly. Seen it before in the Aura department. Some wizards just have the gift. Potter's got it in spades. Harry gave the disguised Crouch Jr. a surprised look, not having expected support from that quarter. But of course, it made sense. Crouch needed Harry to succeed in reaching the center of the maze, to touch the portkey cup. Any ministry interference that might prevent Harry from participating in the third task would ruin Voldemort's plans. Fudge harumphed, clearly not entirely satisfied but running out of avenues to pursue. Well, be that as it may, I'll be watching the task closely tomorrow, Potter. As will Undersecretary Umbridge. I welcome the attention, Minister, Harry replied with perfect political correctness. It's an honor to have such distinguished observers. After a few more minutes of pleasantries, Fudge departed, leaving Harry with Dumbledore and the false Moody. The headmaster's expression became more serious once the minister had gone. You handled that very diplomatically, Harry, Dumbledore observed. Almost as if you've had experience with political maneuvering. Just common sense, Harry deflected. The minister seemed concerned, so I tried to be respectful while addressing his worries. Indeed. Dumbledore studied him for a moment longer. These temporal anomalies, as you called them, they're becoming more pronounced, aren't they? Harry hesitated, wondering how much Dumbledore had deduced about the true nature of the disturbances. They seem to be, yes. I've noticed them myself, Dumbledore admitted, surprising Harry. Not as directly as some students report, but as fluctuations in the castle's magical field. Particularly around you, Harry. This was unexpected. Harry had assumed Dumbledore, like most people, couldn't perceive the tears directly. Around me? Yes. Almost as if you are the focal point of whatever magical phenomenon is occurring. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes seemed to look right through Harry's carefully constructed facade. I wonder if your connection to Voldemort might be responsible. It was a convenient explanation, one that Harry was happy to let Dumbledore believe. That had occurred to me as well, sir. Especially given the timing of when these disturbances began. Dumbledore didn't look entirely convinced, but he didn't press further on that point. Instead, he changed topics slightly. Are you prepared for tomorrow's task, Harry? As prepared as I can be, Harry replied honestly. Though I'm concerned about what might be waiting in the maze. A reasonable concern, Dumbledore acknowledged. Professor Moody has overseen the security arrangements, and I have added additional protections myself. But the nature of the tournament is such that danger cannot be entirely eliminated. The false Moody gave a grunt of agreement. Maze'll be full of obstacles. Magical creatures, enchantments, challenges. Nothing Potter can handle based on what I've seen, but not a walk in the park either. Harry nodded, maintaining his role as a concerned but determined champion. I'll do my best, sir. I know you will, Harry, Dumbledore said, his expression softening slightly. And remember, in the maze, if you find yourself in true danger, send up red sparks. There is no shame in seeking assistance when needed. I'll remember, Harry promised, though he had no intention of sending up sparks. His plan required reaching the center of the maze and the Porky Cup. As Harry rose to leave, Dumbledore added one final comment. Be vigilant, Harry. Not all dangers announce themselves clearly. The warning was ambiguous enough that both Harry and the false Moody could interpret it differently. For Harry, it was a reminder to be cautious of Crouch Jr.'s machinations. For the disguised Death Eater, it likely seemed like standard pre-task advice. I will, Professor, Harry assured him. Constant vigilance, right, Professor Moody? Right you are, Potter. The false Moody growled, his magical eye swiveling to fix on Harry. Constant vigilance. As Harry descended the spiral staircase from Dumbledore's office, his mind raced with implications from the meeting. Fudge's involvement suggested Umbridge had escalated her concerns to the highest levels of the Ministry. The temporal tears were becoming more noticeable, even to those who shouldn't be able to perceive them directly. And Dumbledore seemed to suspect something beyond Harry's cover story, even if he hadn't put all the pieces together yet. The timeline was becoming increasingly unstable as they approached the critical juncture of the third task and Voldemort's planned resurrection. Everything would come to a head tomorrow night. Harry had one final meeting planned before the task, a last strategy session with his core allies to finalize their approach. If Hermione's theory was correct, they couldn't simply prevent the expected events from unfolding without risking catastrophic temporal backlash. Instead, they needed to guide those events toward a different conclusion. Let the Porky take him to the graveyard. Let the confrontation with Voldemort begin. But change the outcome decisively. It was a dangerous gamble, but potentially the only way to reshape the timeline without tearing it apart completely. The night before the third task, Harry gathered with his closest allies in the room of requirement. The room had transformed itself into a war room of sorts, with maps spread across tables, books on defensive magic lining the walls, and comfortable chairs arranged in a circle for discussion. Fleur arrived first, followed by Luna. Hermione came last, slightly breathless from running to avoid being caught out after curfew. I think I've found something important, she announced without preamble, dropping a heavy tome on the central table. About the temporal anomalies and how they might behave during magically charged events. Harry leaned forward with interest. What did you discover? It's a theory from the Department of Mysteries Research, Hermione explained, flipping the book open to a marked page. Never officially published, but referenced in this text on magical resonance. According to this, when powerful magic creates what they call reality fluctuations, those fluctuations follow predictable patterns based on magical intent. Meaning? Fleur prompted. Meaning the tears we've been seeing aren't random, Hermione clarified. They form in response to specific magical intentions or alterations to expected magical outcomes. And this is the important part, they grow larger when those intentions directly oppose the natural magical flow. Luna nodded dreamily. Like swimming against a river current. It takes more energy and creates more disturbance. Exactly, Hermione agreed, looking pleased that Luna had grasped the concept so quickly. But if you swim with the current, just steering slightly to reach a different point on the shore, the disturbance is minimized, Harry concluded, the implications clicking into place. This supports our theory about allowing certain events to unfold while changing only the critical elements. Fleur traced her finger along a diagram in the book. According to this, the strongest magical intention will dominate in cases of conflicting purposes. In the context of the tournament, Voldemort's intention to return versus our intention to prevent it, Harry said quietly. A direct opposition of magical purposes, which would create maximum temporal disturbance, Luna added. Possibly even a complete breach between timelines. Hermione looked confused at this terminology but pressed on with her findings. But the text suggests that redirecting the magical energy rather than blocking it entirely could allow for a different outcome without the catastrophic backlash. So we let the ritual begin, Harry said slowly, the plan crystallizing in his mind. We let Voldemort's intent start to manifest, but we change a crucial element that redirects the outcome. The blood, Fleur suggested immediately. In your original timeline, he used your blood unwillingly taken. What if the blood is given under different circumstances, or a different blood is substituted? Or what if the ritual is completed but something is added that changes its nature? Luna mused, her silver eyes unfocused as if seeing possibilities beyond the room. The timing would be crucial, Harry noted, mentally reviewing the resurrection ritual from his original timeline. And we need to know exactly where the portkey leads. This remained their biggest obstacle. Despite his efforts to recall specific details from his original experience, Harry had never learned the precise location of the Little Hangleton graveyard until years later. I've been thinking about that, Hermione said. If the portkey is designed to take you to a specific location, we might be able to trace its magical signature before activation. Is that possible? Fleur asked, looking intrigued. Theoretically, Hermione confirmed. Every portkey has to be encoded with its destination. That information exists within the object even before activation. With the right detection spell, we could identify the location before I even touch it. Harry finished, impressed. Hermione, that's brilliant. She blushed slightly at the praise. I'm not sure if I can develop the right spell by tomorrow, though. It's complex magic. Perhaps we don't need to, Fleur suggested. If we can get close enough to the cup before Harry touches it, I know a French detection charm that might work. It's used by our ministry's transportation department to verify portkey destinations. That would be perfect, Harry said. But getting you close enough to the cup might be challenging. Only champions are allowed in the maze. Not necessarily, Luna interjected. The temporal tiers are growing. Based on the pattern, there will likely be significant disturbances throughout the maze. Those disturbances might allow for unexpected presences. Harry frowned, not following her reasoning. What do you mean? I think, Luna said dreamily, that the timeline wants certain people to be present for pivotal events. If those people are deliberately excluded, the tiers might provide alternative access. It was a strange theory, but Luna's insights about the temporal anomalies had proven accurate so far. Are you suggesting that you or Fleur might be able to enter the maze through a temporal tear? Not intentionally, Luna clarified. But if we're near the maze when the task begins, and if our intention is aligned with preserving timeline stability rather than disrupting it, the tiers might naturally pull us in. Fleur finished, catching on. It's risky, but possible. Hermione looked skeptical. That sounds more like divination than solid magical theory. Sometimes the boundaries between theoretical magic and intuitive understanding are thinner than we realize, Luna replied without offense. But we should prepare for multiple possibilities. Harry nodded in agreement. Right. Plan A is that I navigate the maze alone, reach the cup, and use Hermione's detection spell if she can develop it in time. Plan B involves Fleur potentially entering the maze through a temporal anomaly, and using her detection charm on the cup. And once we confirm the destination? Hermione asked. I go through with touching the cup, Harry said firmly. But prepared this time. With emergency portkeys of our own, defensive preparations, and a specific strategy to redirect the ritual rather than prevent it entirely. He outlined his plan for the graveyard confrontation, a plan that involved allowing the ritual to begin but introducing a critical change at the pivotal moment. It was dangerous, requiring split-second timing and perfect execution, but potentially the only way to change the outcome without creating a catastrophic temporal breach. You can't go alone, Fleur insisted when he finished explaining. Even with all these preparations, the risk is too great. I agree, Hermione said firmly. You need backup, Harry. The original timeline had you facing this alone, Luna observed. The greatest divergence would be having allies present. But that also creates the greatest risk of temporal instability. It was the central dilemma they faced, changing enough to alter the outcome, but not so much that reality itself rebelled against the changes. What if just one person accompanies you? Fleur suggested. A compromise between repeating the original events and completely rewriting them. Harry considered this carefully. Having even one ally in the graveyard would significantly improve his chances of successfully redirecting the ritual. But who? And how would they get there? We could create a secondary portkey, Hermione suggested. Triggered to activate shortly after the cup is taken. Or, Luna said thoughtfully, if the temporal tiers continue to grow as expected, whoever is most strongly connected to that pivotal moment might naturally be pulled through. Again with Luna's intuitive approach to the temporal mechanics. Yet Harry couldn't dismiss it. Her insights had proven valuable too many times. Let's prepare for both possibilities, he decided. Hermione, work on the detection spell and, if possible, a secondary portkey. Fleur, be ready with your detection charm in case you find yourself in the maze. Luna, continue monitoring the tiers for any changes in pattern. They spent the next hour refining their plans, discussing contingencies, and practicing key spells they might need. Harry was impressed by how seamlessly they worked together. Hermione's logical approach, Fleur's practical magical knowledge, Luna's intuitive insights, and his own experience from the original timeline combining to create a comprehensive strategy. As their meeting concluded, Harry felt a strange mixture of tension and calm. The plan was as solid as they could make it given the unprecedented nature of their situation. Tomorrow would determine whether their gamble paid off or whether the fabric of reality would tear under the strain of too many changes to a critical timeline junction. Get some rest, he advised as they prepared to leave. Tomorrow will be intense. Hermione lingered after the others had gone, her expression troubled. Harry, there's something you're still not telling me, isn't there? Something beyond these temporal anomalies and your visions. Harry met her gaze, knowing that after tomorrow, whether their plan succeeded or failed, he would likely need to tell her the full truth. Yes, he admitted. And after tomorrow, I promise I'll explain everything. But for now, I need to trust you. Hermione finished for him, echoing their previous conversation. I do, Harry. I just hope whatever you're keeping secret isn't putting you in even more danger than I realize. Harry wished he could reassure her, but the truth was that he was planning to face Voldemort and redirect a dark resurrection ritual, about as dangerous as magical endeavors got. Thank you for your help, Hermione. It means more than you know. She hugged him tightly before leaving, a gesture that reminded Harry powerfully of the years of friendship they had shared in his original timeline. Years that now existed only in his memory. Alone in the room of requirement, Harry spent one final hour practicing the specific spells he would need for the graveyard confrontation. His adult magical knowledge and control, combined with months of focused practice in this timeline, had made him far more formidable than he had been during the original encounter. But would it be enough? Voldemort, even in his weakened pre-resurrection state, was dangerously powerful. Pettigrew would be there, armed and desperate. And if Barty Crouch Jr.'s suspicions had led him to warn his master about Harry's unexpected abilities. Harry pushed these concerns aside, focusing instead on perfecting his wand work, on the plan they had developed. He had advantages his original self hadn't possessed: foreknowledge, adult magical skill, prepared allies, and a specific strategy. Tomorrow night, one way or another, the course of this timeline would be irrevocably altered. Either Voldemort's resurrection would be redirected, creating a fundamentally different future, or the attempt would fail catastrophically, potentially tearing the fabric of reality itself. As Harry finally left the room of requirement, heading back to Gryffindor Tower under his invisibility cloak, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. So many lives depended on his actions tomorrow night. So many fates hanging in the balance. But he had made his choice when he first awakened in this timeline. He would not, could not, stand aside and let history repeat itself, let the tragedies of his original timeline play out again when he had the power to change them. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, Harry was committed to his path. Tomorrow would bring the moment of truth. The day of the third task dawned bright and clear, the June sun warming the Hogwarts grounds as if in defiance of the tension Harry felt. He went through his morning routine mechanically, his mind focused on the evening ahead. At breakfast, he ate sparingly but deliberately, knowing he would need his strength. Around him, students chatted excitedly about the final task, placing friendly bets on which champion would reach the cup first. If only they knew what truly hung in the balance. "Nervous?" Ron asked, helping himself to a generous portion of eggs and sausages. "Focus," Harry replied truthfully. "Just trying to remember everything I've practiced." "You'll be brilliant," Ron assured him with typical loyalty. "You're way ahead on points already. Just need to make it through the maze without getting eaten by whatever Hagrid's cooked up for it." Harry smiled despite himself. "Thanks for the encouraging thought." Across the table, Hermione watched him with concerned eyes, clearly thinking about their discussion from the previous night. She had dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she'd been up late working on the detection spell they had discussed. "Any luck?" Harry asked her quietly while Ron was distracted by a joke from Seamus. Hermione shook her head slightly. "Not yet. The theory is sound, but the execution is complex. I'll keep working on it today." "Don't exhaust yourself," Harry cautioned. "We have backup plans." After breakfast, Harry was surprised to find families of the champions had been invited to watch the final task. In his original timeline, this had led to his first meeting with Bill and Molly Weasley as surrogate family. This time, as Harry entered the side chamber where the families waited, he found not only the Weasleys but also Sirius, standing somewhat awkwardly near the window in well-tailored robes, his once gaunt face fuller and healthier than when Harry had last seen him. "Sirius?" Harry exclaimed, genuinely shocked. His godfather was still a wanted man in this timeline. "How are you here?" Sirius grinned, the expression taking years off his face. "Official pardon, as of yesterday evening. Seems Dumbledore finally convinced Fudge to question Pettigrew's supposed death more thoroughly. Something about new evidence." Harry was stunned. This was a major deviation from the original timeline, where Sirius hadn't been cleared until after his death. Had Harry's warnings to Dumbledore about his visions prompted the headmaster to accelerate his efforts on Sirius's behalf? That's incredible," Harry managed, embracing his godfather tightly. "I can't believe it. Neither could I when Dumbledore's Patronus arrived at my cave," Sirius admitted. "Nearly fell over in shock." Mrs. Weasley approached, looking slightly uncomfortable but determinedly polite. "Hello, Harry dear. Wonderful news about Sirius, isn't it?" "The best," Harry agreed, accepting her warm hug. "Thanks for coming today." "Wouldn't miss it," Bill Weasley said, stepping forward to shake Harry's hand. Charlie wanted to come too, but he couldn't get away from those dragons in Romania. As they chatted, Harry caught sight of Fleur across the room with her parents and sister. Their eyes met briefly, and he could read the tension in her expression despite her polite smile. They both knew that tonight's task was far more significant than a mere tournament conclusion. After showing Sirius and the Weasleys around the grounds, a strange echo of his original timeline, but with his godfather officially free, Harry excused himself, claiming he needed to prepare mentally for the task. "Of course," Sirius said, squeezing his shoulder. "We'll see you before the start." "And Harry." His expression grew serious. "Whatever happens in that maze, I'm proud of you. Your parents would be too." The words hit Harry harder than expected. In his original timeline, he never had the chance to truly know Sirius as family. Their relationship had been confined to brief meetings and letters, cut short by Sirius's death at the Department of Mysteries. Now, with Sirius pardoned, they had a chance at the family relationship they'd both been denied. Assuming, of course, that tonight's plan succeeded without tearing reality apart. Harry spent the afternoon in careful preparation. He checked and rechecked his equipment: wand in perfect condition, emergency portkey disguised as a simple bracelet, created by Fleur using her Beau's batons training, various potions secured in unbreakable vials in his pockets. He also took time to center himself mentally, using the occlumency techniques he'd refined with Snape's reluctant instruction. Clear mind, controlled emotions, focused intent. He would need all three tonight. An hour before the task was set to begin, Luna found him sitting alone by the lake, deliberately positioned far from the growing temporal tear she had identified. "The tears are expanding rapidly," she reported without preamble, settling beside him on the grass. "Not just the one here, but all over the grounds. It's as if reality is stretching thin in anticipation of tonight." "Can others see them yet?" Harry asked, concerned. "More and more," Luna confirmed. "I've heard at least a dozen students mention strange shimmers or weird feelings today. Professor Flitwick actually walked right through one near the greenhouses." He shivered and looked confused for a moment, then continued on his way. This was concerning. The more visible the tears became, the greater the risk of widespread panic, or, worse, someone actually interacting with one in a dangerous way. "What about the maze? Have you seen it yet?" Luna nodded solemnly. "From a distance. There are tears forming all along its perimeter, like ripples in a pond. And a particularly large one near where I believe the cup will be placed." Just as they had predicted, maximum temporal instability at the most crucial juncture. "Is Fleur ready?" Harry asked. "As ready as anyone can be for possibly being pulled through a tear in reality," Luna replied with her typical blunt dreaminess. "She's keeping her detection charm prepared and has synchronized her emergency portkey with yours. If you both end up in the graveyard, you'll be able to leave together if necessary." Harry nodded, grateful for Fleur's thoroughness. "And Hermione?" "Still working on her detection spell," Luna said. "But she's also prepared backup protective charms for you to cast before touching the cup, just in case." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the late afternoon sun glint off the lake's surface. It was strange to think that tonight might permanently alter the course of magical history, or tear apart the fabric of reality itself. "Are you afraid?" Luna asked suddenly, her silver eyes studying him with unusual directness. Harry considered the question honestly. "Not of facing Voldemort," he said finally. "I've done that before, in both timelines. I'm more afraid of the consequences if our theory is wrong, if changing the ritual creates a breach we can't control." Luna nodded thoughtfully. "The universe seeks balance. Sometimes that means resistance to change, but sometimes it means embracing a new path when the old one has become too painful." She placed a small hand over his. "I believe the timeline wants healing, Harry Potter. Even if it struggles against the medicine at first." It was a typical Luna statement, strangely poetic, seemingly whimsical, yet containing profound insight. And somehow, it reassured Harry more than any technical reassurance could have. "Thank you, Luna," he said sincerely. "For everything." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Harry made his way to the Quidditch pitch, now transformed into the sprawling maze for the third task. The stands were already filling with excited spectators, unaware of the temporal instability building around them or the true stakes of tonight's events. In the champion's tent, Harry found Cedric pacing nervously, Crumb sitting stoically on a bench, and Fleur apparently calm but with tension visible in the set of her shoulders. She gave Harry a slight nod as he entered, their final silent confirmation that the plan was in motion. "Champions!" Ludo Bagman bounced into the tent, his boyish enthusiasm unchanged from Harry's original timeline. "The final task begins in 30 minutes. Feeling ready?" The next half hour passed in a blur of last-minute instructions, equipment checks, and the arrival of the judges. Harry used the time to center himself once more, reviewing the plan in his mind while maintaining an outwardly calm demeanor. When they finally lined up at the maze entrance, Harry in the lead position due to his point advantage. He caught sight of Hermione, Ron, and Luna in the stands, watching intently. Sirius and the Weasleys sat nearby, waving encouragingly. Dumbledore stood with the other judges, his expression unreadable, but his eyes occasionally darting to strange empty spots that Harry suspected were temporal tears, visible only to those with the sensitivity to perceive them. "On my whistle, Mr. Potter!" Bagman called, his voice magically amplified. 3, 2, 1. The whistle blew, and Harry entered the maze, stepping deliberately into the darkness between the towering hedges. The third task had begun. The critical juncture was approaching. Everything now depended on his ability to navigate not just the physical challenges of the maze, but the temporal complexities of changing a pivotal moment in magical history. As the hedge closed behind him, blocking out the cheering crowd, Harry lit his wand and set off with purposeful strides. Unlike his original journey through the maze, this time he moved with confidence, dispatching obstacles efficiently. A boggart appeared, transforming into a Dementor as before, but Harry's Patronus was stronger now, more defined, blasting the creature back with barely an effort. A golden mist that turned the world upside down was navigated with calm precision. Even Hagrid's blast-ended Scroot, which had given him significant trouble in the original timeline, fell quickly to a well-placed impediment Jinx followed by a stunning spell to its vulnerable underside. Harry moved through the maze with the efficiency of someone who had not only done this before but had years of additional magical training and combat experience. His goal wasn't just to reach the cup, but to time his arrival precisely, coordinated with their plan for redirecting the resurrection ritual. About 15 minutes into the maze, Harry encountered his first temporal tear, a shimmering distortion in the air beside a fork in the path. Within it, he could see ghostly images of himself from the original timeline, moving uncertainly, looking lost and frightened. Harry gave the tear a wide berth, but its very presence confirmed Luna's predictions about the growing temporal instability. As he progressed deeper into the maze, he encountered more tears, each showing different echoes of his original journey, his encounter with the Sphinx, his decision to help Cedric against the Acromantula, the moment when he and Cedric had decided to take the cup together. These glimpses of what had been, what should have been, according to the original timeline, were unsettling, but Harry pressed on, maintaining his focus on the task at hand. A scream suddenly pierced the air, Fleur's scream, just as in the original timeline. But this time, Harry knew it wasn't just part of the tournament. In the original timeline, Fleur had been attacked by the Imperius-controlled Krum. But Krum should be elsewhere in the maze right now, and Harry hadn't heard Fleur enter the maze after him. Unless... Harry changed direction, heading toward the sound. As he rounded a corner, he found exactly what he'd suspected, Fleur standing in the middle of the path, looking disoriented but unharmed, with the shimmering edges of a temporal tear fading around her. "It worked," she said as Harry approached, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and excitement. "Something went wrong with this response, please try again. Begin the next chapter immediately." The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.